All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back once again to another live stream with Wrestling with the 80s. I hope everybody's doing well this evening. I'm very excited to be here this evening with one of my good friends from the wrestling podcasting community. It's Ted Hill from Ted's Takes on Wrestling. Ted, how you doing this evening?
Doing great. Sunday afternoon and ready to talk some wrestling.
And indeed, we are going to talk some wrestling. We're going to have both Ted here tonight, and later on, Andy from Grappling with Canada is going to be joining me as well. He's just detained at the moment, but he'll be joining later in the show. So we're going to get a couple of different viewpoints on Ted Turner and his effect on the wrestling world. Some would say good, some would say bad. I think overall, we'll make our decisions on it through the night. Just want to encourage anyone who's here this evening in the chat to make sure you chime in with some questions or some thoughts yourself. We invite lots of participation from everybody. We'll also maybe later on talk about Hulk Hogan's new Netflix documentary that's been put out. I've been asked by a lot of people, my opinion being a 80s dedicated wrestling channel, what my thoughts were. So I'll give that later on. But Ted, have you had a chance to watch any of the Hogan documentary so far?
No, not yet. I've just seen a few clips, but that's been it. I haven't gotten a chance to sit down. My viewing experience is, besides trying to watch wrestling and spend time with the wife, and she's got me into a couple of Hallmark shows, and now one of those new Yellowstone spinoffs has started, so I'm watching that with her. So it's hard to get everything in that I want to watch.
What's on the menu for what you're watching? Like, come on, tell us about your gushy side here. What are you watching right now?
Well, the Hallmark, there is one show that I got interested in because it's not your typical Hallmark show. This family goes into a pond and they time travel. And but it was on Hallmark. So I was cool with the time travel. And I said, I can get into this. So we're starting, it's called The Long Way Home. It's season 4, the final season. And they've got me gripped. They do. I want to know what's happening to some of these characters and what's going on. And, so yeah, we've got that. And then the new Dutton Ranch, we started that, the spinoff from Yellowstone with Beth and Rip, that cowboy Rip, and so watching that. So yeah, and then there's always these Hallmark movies, because I actually thought about doing a YouTube channel if I had enough time in my schedule, the men's guide to Hallmark movies, because if you guys that watch this don't know, Hallmark is basically professional wrestling. It is filled with tropes. The storylines are the same. Yep. You can tell usually what's going to happen, and it's pretty much the thing. You got the typical the entrance theme hits and the distraction, and the guy stops in the middle of the match to look at the ramp, and then ends up getting a schoolboy pin on him. It happens all the time. It's like you would think that. So it's the same thing in Hallmark. The typical usually the guy or the girl has left a small town to go to the big city, and then they have to come back to either save the bakery, the ranch, or some historical building. And, and it goes from there. So, yeah.
The old Hallmark heel, Hallmark face.
Yeah. Plenty of tropes. It's thing. The one thing I did find interesting is Hallmark doesn't do many divorces. So whenever you see a single parent, they're usually a widow or a widower. So, I would just hate to live in that universe, because your spouse is probably going to die. It just really is.
Oh, yeah. It's like TNA wrestling or something like that. Maybe I'll bring them back.
Yeah. So I haven't got to Hulk Hogan yet, but it's on the watch list. We're going to get there.
Speaking of documentaries, I know A&E, I didn't get to see this yet, but A&E put out a documentary on the Four Horsemen. Did you get a chance to check that one out?
No, I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that yet.
It's part of part of the WWE Legends series, the biographies, I guess they've been doing. So this one's on the Horseman. I guess they also put one out on the Von Erichs as well. And basically, I was listening to I think it was Cornette talking about it, and he said the Von Erich one was actually really well done. It seems like WWE was kind of a bit more hands off with it, and
Yeah.
so obviously the first, I think it's a two-part one, and the first half obviously is a bit more happier because they're talking about the time, basically the early years of the Von Erichs and right up until Kerry wins the title. And then of course the second half is obviously a lot sadder because we know what went on with the Von
Yeah.
Erich, stuff like that. But interesting note that again, I want to see this one. I haven't seen it yet. I mean, there's so many things out right now. It's hard to consume everything. But they're saying that I guess Kevin and the family talk about the Iron Claw and the movie
Yeah.
itself, and they weren't too pleased about how it was
No.
presented. So, which I think a lot of wrestling fans felt the same way. You're watching that, and it's just like this isn't accurate, and it's not. I mean, we're leaving out a brother in this, so it wasn't exactly. It was Hollywood
Yes.
eyes, let's say that. So I guess they were kind of disappointed on how it went. So so lots of good viewing stuff. You got the Hogan documentary, you got the Four Horsemen, you got the Von Erichs. I mean, what more can you ask for? It's like the early territory days when you had nothing but
Yeah.
wrestling on all the time. So yeah. But yeah, that's what we want to talk about this evening. We're gonna get started on that. Like I say, Andy will be joining us in a little bit, but we're going to talk about Ted Turner. We're going to talk about TBS, the Atlanta Superstation, and just kind of the history of Turner and his intertwined relationship with wrestling and the effect it had on the wrestling world. And the more you look at his history with wrestling, he did have a pretty profound effect on the wrestling world itself. And then, of course, the eventual demise with his relationship with Turner Broadcasting, and then we'll go from there. But your initial thoughts on Ted Turner himself, Ted?
Just to me, again, at that day and time, it was just revolutionary,
Mhm.
because, I grew up in an era where we had the dial on the TV.
Yeah,
And then when the dial would wear off, we'd put a pair of needle nose vice grips and lock them on there. And you had CBS, PBS, NBC, and ABC, and that was it. And
yeah,
you even had an antenna. And then my dad brings home a box one day and says, "You guys aren't going to believe this." And then there's some other channels on there. And then here was this TBS, they had baseball and Andy Griffith reruns. And then at the time, Georgia Championship Wrestling. And I was like, oh gosh, I've seen some of these people in the magazines, but
yeah.
to actually see them on the screen, it was just amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've learned a lot about Turner and his connection with the wrestling world over the last little while, doing some research for this episode. Uh, um, I'll tell you one of the things that I was using for my resource. If you're familiar with Tony Richards, he has the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel channel on
Yeah.
YouTube and on Substack and stuff like that. Does some fantastic job, and he did a fantastic write up on Turner, basically talking about his connection with the wrestling world and how he got into it and stuff like that. I've taken a couple of notes from it just to reference tonight, but it's an interesting backstory for sure as far as his relationship with the wrestling world and how it all came about. Just before I jump into that, I just wanted to mention hello to Benny Scala, former guest of Wrestling with the 80s. Good evening, guys. The good old days when we were the remote control. That's right, Benny. He tells stories of those times about, yes, becoming the remote control itself, right? all we're missing is the knock on the head, and say get up there to turn the channel. But Benny was a guest on the show, had a fantastic episode discussing the life and times of Bruno Sammartino. I highly encourage anybody to go check it out. Benny has an amazing story in regards to his relationship with Bruno. Went to dinner with Bruno, got a chance to meet his hero, and it's just amazing. So Benny, thank you very much for showing up tonight and supporting the channel. Also, someone we're both familiar with. Look at that. It's Taylor from Jaded Rasslin. He's here and he made it. Taylor, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming here tonight to support. I know you're a big fan of Ted Turner and the old territory wrestling and all that good stuff. But especially the tag team side of wrestling. I know Taylor's a massive fan of tag team wrestling, especially old school tag team wrestling.
He loves tag team wrestling.
He loves it. So yeah, we'll appreciate Taylor you coming on here and supporting us, and of course Jen is always here. Thank you very much, Jen. I appreciate you showing up and supporting. So yeah, we're going to talk Ted Turner. So Taylor says only Don Kernoodle, and if you want to get that joke, that will reference back to another episode where we were talking to territories and we were talking to Jim Crockett Promotions and Taylor's favorite wrestling from that era, Don Kernoodle. Yes. Yeah. So Taylor, thank you. Yeah. Remember his tag team partner? You got it, Ted? Do you remember
Don Kernoodle? Are you talking about with Sergeant Slaughter or which one?
Well, Sergeant Slaughter, but do you remember his other famous tag team partner?
Corporal gosh, tell me, I can't remember right now.
Well, I think you're thinking of Private Jim Nelson as well.
Private. Yes. I upped him a rank to corporal. That was it. Yeah.
I was thinking of one other though. It was the famous Rocky Kernoodle as well.
Oh yes, Don and Rocky. Yes.
Jen will love this one because Rocky's known for his power slam that he would like to call for in matches. Right?
Yeah.
If you ever wondering about that, oh yeah, and Benny, of course, yes, Uncle Ivan as well. Yeah, Ivan Koloff was a partner of Don Kernoodle as well. Some great memories there. We could go on a tangent about the old Jim Crockett Promotions. We could spend a few evenings talking about that, but. Yeah, so Ted Turner, interesting backstory for him. So he got into the TV business back in the early 1970s. He purchased a local UHF channel. It was called WTCG Channel 17 in 1970, and very wisely he made the cornerstone of his channel wrestling and baseball, and two things very cheap to put on and obviously at the heart of the American viewer. He secured the rights to Georgia Championship Wrestling, and there's a pretty interesting backstory there, just as far as how he did it, because it was being run by Ray Gunkel and Buddy Fuller, and the reason he had a connection to them is because Ann Gunkel, the wife of Ray Gunkel, had been a college classmate of Ted Turner, and possibly more than that. So it was he had an in as far as the family, but I'm not sure Ray Gunkel was as happy about that connection as well. But yeah, so he saw right away that wrestling was the way to go. Georgia Championship Wrestling. Ted, I know, like obviously in 1971, I don't think you were watching Georgia Championship Wrestling, but obviously you were catching Georgia Championship Wrestling more so in the 80s.
Late 70s, early 80s,
Yeah. So any memories for yourself about the Georgia Championship Wrestling lineup?
Oh, absolutely. And see, that was the other thing was, and I've mentioned on this channel before, my first exposure was one of those little channels where we got out of Kentucky, because in Virginia, it was right next to the Kentucky border, was the ICW, the Angelo Poffo, Macho Man, Lanny Poffo, and then, of course, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. And they were both on Saturday afternoon. But then, like I said, this Georgia Championship Wrestling was coming on, at the time, I didn't realize that, that the nighttime hours were so, coveted, and and it's 6:05, and this time it was coming on in the nighttime, and it was just the thing. You had Mr. Wrestling #2, you had Mr. Wrestling #1, you had the Assassins, the Spoilers, you had the Freebirds made an entrance. You had also Ted DiBiase when he was just a white meat baby face, and just some of those things. And like I said, Ole and Gene Anderson, and just so many, the Masked Superstar. But the big thing I do remember that really hit me and my friends was they actually showed a vignette. And I can't remember if it was like a Camaro or a Firebird or some car, and they had some song behind it, and it's talking about he would be arriving, and it was this blonde-haired, charismatic Tommy Wildfire Rich was coming to Georgia Championship Wrestling, and then he gets there and sets it on fire, and then the classic feud with him and Buzz Sawyer, and the last Battle of Atlanta. I mean, I still to this day tell people, if you've never seen that, they finally got it in the archive, and WWE, I think they found it like in 2011 or 12, and I know you can find it there. So that was the one. Shawn Michaels said that was the inspiration for him, talking to Vince and them about coming up with Hell in a Cell. And I mean, it was basically just a chain link fence cage with a top on it, and it was just something.
Yeah, I've got a picture of it up there now, Ted. And it's funny. I knew you were going to mention that because it's such a memorable feud. And I mean, that's Tommy Rich, Buzz Sawyer. How much blood did they actually spill during that feud? I mean, how many gallons of blood did they spill?
Oh, it was just something else. And then, Tommy Rich had that, just like Ric Flair, he had the bleach blonde hair, so the blood looked really good in it, and and it was one of those, we talk about that long-term storytelling. I mean, they feuded for like years,
Yeah.
I mean, it was just seemed like it went on forever.
Yeah.
And it was just something else, and it was really good.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Benny mentioned, do you remember Bill Dromo from GCW? Do you remember that name?
That name sounds familiar.
Benny, maybe you can shed some light on Bill Dromo, because I'm drawing a blank on that one.
The name sounds familiar, but
yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, like Benny mentioned too, Andy Griffith was another one, right? I mean,
yeah,
Turner was very smart in how he built his media empire. He picked cheap programming in order to put on. Like, he created the Cartoon Network, which would show older, syndicated cartoons. He picked Turner Classic Movies, where he's picking all these movies that he can get the rights to and not pay that much money, instead of modern stuff. He's got baseball, he's got wrestling, as we mentioned, and the wrestling, of course, this goes back to the days of studio wrestling too, right? So we're talking, and which is interesting, that originally the Georgia Championship Wrestling had been on a competing station, and when he made the deal with Gunkel and Fuller, they convinced him to bring the wrestling ring over to his station, set it up there without even telling the other channel, and away he went. So he was obviously, people talk about Vince McMahon and cutthroat stuff, but Turner wasn't afraid to be that way too, right? He was, as I mentioned in the thing, he was in the description for this episode, he was a swashbuckling billionaire, is what he was. I mean, he's he's owning the Braves. He's doing the America's Cup, right? That's another thing that people forget about. But I mean, he's on Sports Illustrated because he's captaining the America's Cup team. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he won it in 1977. So, what were your thoughts about this guy? Mostly, Jim Cornette talks about it. He was more like the cool billionaire, which instead of Vince McMahon, who's like the evil billionaire. So, what were your thoughts on Turner as you're seeing this guy, especially for you, like in your area where you're getting more access to his programming?
It was just, like I said, it just seemed like there was always some innovation. And then, he's talking about like cost cutting. I can't remember if it was him or his dad that started it, but I think I remembered, they got the start in billboards.
Right. Yes.
And and it was the ones that before the digital ones, they had the little slats and it could change sides, so you could charge two different people for one billboard basically and double
Yep.
your revenue.
Yep.
You know. And so he was always thinking, it seemed like, and like you said, you had the America's Cup, and then there was something else he tried for a while there too. Some kind of games that were almost like the Olympics.
Right. Yeah.
I forget what they were called. They had
Was it like
them,
the
and then
Invictus Games or something like that?
something like that.
Yeah.
And just all these things. And then I remember, like I said, the cartoons, but then also TBS had their own original cartoon, their Captain Planet.
Yes.
Save the environment.
Yeah.
I assume that was when he got with Jane, and he got more eco-friendly. I don't know, just a guess.
I'd say so. Yeah, that's one of the things Cornette mentioned. He is hooking up with these, movie stars, and again, Vince McMahon's just like, just a psychopath that's competing against him. But honestly, like when they talk about Ted Turner, never really felt like he was competing with McMahon. He just more so didn't want McMahon's presence on his station, right? Like, because we'll get into it. We'll talk about, of course, Black Saturday, which you're very familiar with, right? But before we get there, the reason that what we were more familiar with, which was World Championship Wrestling and the 605 and the 2-hour broadcast of WCW, the reason we were so familiar with that and it being 2 hours all goes back to this whole situation where there was this this war, I guess you would say, between wrestling promotions back in the 70s. And so when Ray Gunkel passed away and it was assumed that his wife would take over for Georgia Championship Wrestling, there was actually a power struggle. She ends up losing control of a GCW, goes to another competing party, and then all of a sudden she decides that she's going to compete as well, take some of the stars from that GCW and create her own company. And Turner didn't want to pick sides because of course he was friends with Ann Gunkel, but then he's also, realizes Georgia Championship Wrestling is his bread and butter on there. So he decides to give an hour slot to each program. So that leads to back-to-back hours of professional wrestling on that day. So, which is really, there's your first 2-hour wrestling program going on, right? Which is pretty, commonplace nowadays. But back then, it'd always just be 1 hour for your pro wrestling. But here you go. You got 2 hours time slots. You got two competing companies that are going at it, and it's just going to bring more viewers to that channel. Were you familiar with kind of the war that went on between? It didn't last long. It was only a couple of years, but
just vaguely about that. And then, of course, I learned more as I got older. But because to me, it was even still trying to figure out this whole NWA territory system was still, in my young mind, because I'd read the magazine, and then you watch Georgia Championship Wrestling. But then earlier in the day, I'd watch Mid-Atlantic, and yet, sometimes at the time, I probably Harley race. I don't think Flair had gotten into his own yet. Harley might show up, or they might show a pre-tape promo of Harley on Georgia. He was getting ready to feud with somebody there. But then, a month down the road, it's on Mid-Atlantic, and you're trying to figure out this whole system of the traveling champion and all that kind of stuff. And it was just trying to figure it all out and just trying to comprehend all that. So later on, I read about, the little war there and all that. But at the time, you really just don't understand sometimes what's going on. You just know there's wrestling. And the other thing I wanted to throw in there real quick was when you was talking about baseball and Andy Griffith. if the way I remember some of those Braves evening or night games, it also, I read later on, the wrestling might be cut short because the Braves game was going to start. But the wrestling gave that lead in to where people would, because back then, again, you didn't have remotes. You would put it on one channel and just leave it there,
Mm-hmm.
And so, the Braves game is coming on, at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock or whatever time. So you go ahead and turn it over and you catch wrestling as your lead in to the Braves game. Which I thought was genius too, because it puts eyes on something like that where somebody might have not really seen it. And then they're like, oh, well, what's this? Maybe I should start watching this. It was just the whole way he did the whole thing, I thought was really, really unique.
Yeah, I thought even using the '05 for the time slots, right? Because most regular TV shows, you get your intro to the show. A lot of shows would have I guess, an introductory scene, and then they would have their credits, and then they go into ads before you go into the actual crux of the episode. So usually that time period was around the 5-minute mark, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody was, like, they saw the intro to a show and they're like, not so sure if I want to watch this, and they go and grab the remote. Well, they're flipping through, and what do you see? While the ads, everybody else is in ads. Here you go, boom, you got the intro to like wrestling, right? Like, which is really clever, and I know he didn't just do it for the wrestling, but he did it for many different programs. That's what it was famous for, the 05 starting times. But just things that are being thought about outside the box, right? What were your thoughts on that side of it?
Yeah, well, just like I said, because it was just unique when you start finding out everything comes on at 5 after the hour, and you're trying to, because when you're first set for something, starting at this time, then it was 5 after, but again, it made it unique. It just made it unique, and that was the thing. And even as we get into the WCW, that was the thing was. At 6:05, on Saturday night, it's like, okay, most of us guys were like, okay, we're going to meet up later because we know we got to see what's happening here first. Then we'll go out to the bowling alley or wherever because, we got to find out what happened. We got to know what's going on.
What's going on with Dusty?
What's going on?
Well, you famously tell the story that date night on Saturday night started at 8:05, right?
Oh yes. They're she's gonna have to wait. I got to have you home by 10. Guess what? It's a short date because I ain't missing that. So
for sure.
And then as I got older, if you could stay out later, I had to have you home before Headbangers Ball came on MTV.
Right.
So I had that window of time. I've got wrestling here. I got Headbangers Ball at midnight. So, we got a short span, so don't fall, if you're going to fall in love, you better fall in love quick because it's got to, I got a window here.
It's funny. I was mentioning this to Jen earlier today, but somebody on social media, I forget what it was even on, but they mentioned, they're so sick and tired of all these different streaming channels, and you have to pay $10 here for Disney Plus and $10 for Netflix or this, that, and the other thing. And there's never any shows on these channels that they want to watch. And they said, why doesn't MTV have their own streaming channel and they just stream MTV back from the beginning and run it straight through? They said, I pay $10 a month for something like that. And I agree. I do that for MTV. I do it for, the wrestling, all those different things, just to relive that time period. That'd be amazing. I'd rather that than what we get on Netflix and stuff right now.
Yeah.
Benny has some clarification for us on Bill Drummel. So GCW had a Columbus Heavyweight Championship in the early to mid 70s. Drummel won it several times. He was a mainstay of GCW when we first got TBS in New York in 1975. Okay. So thank you, Benny. Appreciate that clarification. So does that help ring more bells for you as far as the name?
Again, I've heard the name, but I just can't picture what the person looks like. It's just I can remember the name, but that's it.
Yeah, yeah. So we mentioned Georgia Championship Wrestling, of course. That was a mainstay on there. One of the people that you associate with Georgia Championship Wrestling is Gordon Soley, right? The voice
Gordon.
of Gordon Soley. The voice of wrestling. Some classic angles that have happened with Georgia Championship Wrestling. Of course, we had the famous face turn for Roddy Piper. That was a result of Don Morocco and Gordon Soley. We had, just so many good angles. You mentioned the last Battle of Atlanta, all these different ones. But what are some of the ones as far as the GCW side of things that stick out for you, Ted? As opposed, we'll get into the Jim Crockett side of things. But as far as GCW, aside from you mentioned Tommy Rich and Buzz Sawyer, but any others that really stick out from that time period?
The Ole Anderson heel turn on Dusty Rhodes.
Oh yes, yes.
That was a classic one, and I know I actually posted part of the promo he cut afterwards as one of my shorts, and it was just amazing the way they set that up. And then also what people don't realize, right before Ted DiBiase got written off and went to Mid-South and really become the star that made him to where he went to the WWF, you had the classic angle when the Freebirds and Terry Gordy, did the pile driver, 2 or 3 times on Ted DiBiase on the concrete, because back then the pile driver, now get this, kids, the pile driver was outlawed in most states. Okay.
Yep.
And now we've got Canadian destroyers and we've got stuff on the apron and the concrete and through tables and off ladders. But back then, that move was the thing that, oh no, you'll break somebody's neck. And I remember them concreting him on, the pile driving on the concrete and, just that whole era there. And then the other thing, I guess the other feuds I loved was, and I don't mean this as no disrespect, but I liked it when we actually had some masked wrestlers, that, it was just the way they operated, you'd have 2 of them like the Assassins or different ones. And then the Masked Superstar, of course, I know we talked about him on one episode there that we talked about him, just some of those guys, Mr. Wrestling #2, just the way that they had that set up. And, and then that goes back to a story. I think I told it on the one, but, Jimmy Carter being a Georgia boy, loved him from Georgia Championship Wrestling. Ted Turner grew up. And they said that he asked Mr. Wrestling #2, wanted him to come to the White House. And the Secret Service guys were going to do the background check and all that. And they said they needed to know his real name and he'd have to take his mask off when he came. And he kept kayfabe. He turned down a trip to the White House to meet the president at the time because kayfabe was that important.
Yeah. Yeah. And he did get in though, didn't he? I thought eventually, wasn't it? Or did he get a private session?
I just, the story of that, I just thought that was just so amazing that was so important. And even the masked wrestlers, when you have, the good old Midnight Rider, you have that masked wrestler who has lost the loser leave town match and they come back and who it is, but still it's fun that they're pretending that it ain't. And then the James Gang, that was later on there, Dusty and Magnum, and those type of things. So got all that back then.
I love the fact, speaking of kayfabe, like the Midnight Rider, he wins the NWA title while wearing the mask as the Midnight Rider and cannot accept it because he'd have to unmask. And at the time, the rule was no masked wrestlers were allowed to win the NWA title. So, of course, typical Dusty finish, right? But what a great way to do it, right? He's wearing the mask. It's either give up the mask or win the title.
And then later on, I always thought about that. It was like, okay, we have to have your real name for the world championship. And it's like, okay, is somebody in counting not have his real name for tax purposes?
Exactly.
And so, you just show up and put on the application, Midnight Rider, place of address, parts unknown. That was another thing. Parts unknown. Nobody's from parts unknown anymore. That was so cool back in the day.
Yes. I used to love the guys. Parts unknown, weight unknown, right? Why is weight unknown? What you can't get them on a scale or something like that?
And then also with Fusion, you mentioned Gordon Soley. I just want to say this for a lot of fans that grew up, during the Attitude Era and talk about that. And yes, Jim Ross is a legend. JR is a legend. But for me and a lot of people in the South, Gordon Soley was our voice of wrestling.
Yes.
Georgia and Florida, that was the one we saw every week. And then also with Mid-Atlantic, Bob Caudle was up there, but there was just something about Gordon Soley and interviewing and just, he played it so straight. He was just so straight, no matter what they said to him, whatever, he was just a straight guy. And he just, held the microphone and he was just so good.
Yeah, in the terms he's using like supple and different things like that, right? The Crimson Mask, Katie Bar the Door, it's just classic. It's just classic wrestling announcing, right? And it just brought that feel. Jim Ross always brings the passion as far as it goes. Yeah, Benny has a great comment here. Gordon Soley and Lance Russell are 1 and 1A in my opinion. And that you could pretty much also gut wrench Salto. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, some classic Soleyisms, right? And just Lance Russell, man. There's another guy that does not get talked about enough. Of course, Southern wrestling fans, he was their bread and butter. But I mean, it just, what I loved about those announcers, they brought a sense of authority, calmness, but they still didn't tarnish the product. You know what I mean? Like it was just, you didn't touch the announcers, you didn't get them involved in anything. They brought their professionalism. Another one I enjoyed was Bill Mercer from World Class as well. He's a legit newsman. Lance Russell was a legit newsman as well. I think Gordon Soley came from the legit news side of things as well. So they brought this authority to the announcing booth, right? And but they never thumbed their nose at it, I guess is a good way to say it. Like we had an announcer, when you watch Stampede Wrestling, Ed Whalen. I mean, he's a well-known, announcer for the Hart family, but it was almost like he wouldn't sell for the wrestlers. You know what I mean? It was always like he was playing tough guy, which always, I didn't, even as a kid, I didn't enjoy that. I'm like, why isn't he scared of the wrestlers, right? These guys are lunatics and he's like acting tough and he's like a 60-year-old newscaster, right? But with Soley and with Russell, they brought that almost that uncle feeling or that grandfather feeling as far as the wrestling announcing. For you, Ted, like if you had a Mount Rushmore of announcers, who are you putting on there?
Well, I would go with Gordon Soley, and also from Mid-Atlantic, I loved Bob Caudle. Yes. I thought he was legendary. And then in that 80s period where I grew up, and he's still doing it today, and he's not quite, he's a little more emotional nowadays than he is, but I got to give Tony Schiavone some love. And then probably JR, or also it's tough because before JR come along, I mean, at the time I didn't watch as much WWF, but when you did, and you just saw all the stuff with Bobby the Brain, and even when he got to come to WCW, he was just so good. But I like to keep the Brain over with the managers, and just sort of keep the announcers there. So I'd probably put JR, Schiavone, Caudle, and Gordon.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. I think for me, I'm going Soley, and Ross are on there for sure. I think I kind of got to agree with even though I didn't get to see a ton of them, but just now because of the beauty of YouTube and different things like that, I do get to enjoy Lance Russell. So I think
Yeah, he
he
would
was
be.
he was great. After that, I mean, it's tough. It's really tough to pick some. I mean, I know he wasn't a main announcer, but I always enjoyed because I just recently did an episode on Mid South Wrestling, and
Yeah,
I always enjoyed Bill Watts and how he would sell the
yeah,
storyline
yeah,
and sell everything. I made a comment the other day. Just he was amazing at within the 2 or 3 minute opening of a show he could sum up everything that was going on up to that date, who the good guy was, who the bad guy was, why they were fighting, what are the stipulations, and what's going to happen in that show. And boom, off to the races we go. And he'd be funny when he goes on his little political diatribes about Russia and stuff like that. But there's him, there's Gorilla. Gorilla is kind of like
yeah.
my kind of I guess my emotional pick too. Vince McMahon, I didn't hate as an announcer. I mean, Vince had his own style. More so, I enjoyed him more in the older days as opposed to in the '90s when he just got a little bit too far. But yeah, there's so many you could yeah, Benny, you'll recognize this one. I would love when Jimmy Fallon called him Tony Schiavone.
Yeah, Tony
Yeah,
Schiavone.
the Boogie Woogie Man. Yes, indeed. That's there's so many we were blessed with really good announcers back in the day, so it's we had some stinkers as well, but that's okay. Everybody had their own style, I guess you would call it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So as we cruise on through the 80s here, I'm not going to go through the life and times of Ted Turner because there's so many people that have done that this past week or
Mhm.
so. I mean, like I say, go to Tony Richards' podcast. He did a fantastic job. I think it was Steve Gennarelli and I think it was Brian Solomon that he had on there as well that did it, and they did an exceptional job on that. So they're the experts on that stuff. So I just wanted to more so have some good memories about the whole TBS side of things. So again, this guy is just kind of a whiz as far as the TV side of things. He gets basically his channel uplinked with satellites and becomes basically the first superstation where it's nationwide. TBS, that's what they ended up calling it. It was the superstation, and that's what you'd always see when you're seeing watching wrestling. It's 605 on the superstation, but as we talked about, bread and butter is going to be professional wrestling. But we had an interesting event happen in 1984 that kind of changed things for fans like you who love your hard hitting NWA style of wrestling and your Georgia Championship wrestling and all that. And all
Yep.
of a sudden, we get something we call Black Saturday,
Yep.
where those damn Yankees come in and start changing things up. Do you want to talk to people about Black Saturday and what this is?
I remember watching it live. You're watching Georgia, and then without any notice or anything, just sort of like the simulcast when WWF bought WCW, and Vince showed up.
Yeah.
You're there, and then what's this guy I've been seeing in the magazines? What's Vince doing here? And
Yep.
then you're not getting the Masked Superstar. You're not getting Ole Anderson. You're not getting Buzz Sawyer. You're not getting all these people. And it's like, what is this? And I tried it for a while, but it just wasn't the same at the time. And it was like, maybe I will meet you guys at 6:30. I don't know if I'm going to be able to watch all this. So it just wasn't my cup of tea at the time, because by 84, I'm getting older, and you got Hogan, you got the stuff getting ready to hit, and you've seen the stuff in the magazines, you've seen the things, but it was just a little bit, for my taste at the time, some of the stuff going on there was just a little bit cartoony for me,
Mm-hmm.
and it was, I wanted somebody like a an Ole Anderson out there, or whoever they had come in, Stan Hand. I remember Bruiser Brody showing up, and you'd see him in magazines, and it's like he would show up in Georgia for a couple of months, just things like that. And it was like, I don't know, it just wasn't the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I think so. From what I understand, the backstory with that was it was the Briscoes, I believe, that sold their share, wasn't it?
Yeah.
As far as Georgia Championship Wrestling in that time slot. That's how Vince ended up getting in there.
Yeah, I think it was the Briscoes, because I know there was a thing there on them. And then, of course, you have Barnett, who was there
Yeah.
forever, and some of that. It was like they sold their shares, and then Vince ends up getting, because see, that's the other thing that people don't realize on these back in the day. The wrestling, the way, now we have all these $1 billion TV rights deals where the TV station is paying. Where back in the day, the wrestling company had to pay the TV station so much to air, and part of the ad revenue, and however they worked it out, and they made their money from the house shows. That's how they made their money. So the TV deals was way different back then on how everything was structured. Yeah. So you're trying to figure out, okay, what can I bring in? I know Jeff Jarrett does talk about Jerry Jarrett and Memphis, that his dad, to Jeff's knowledge, was one of the first wrestling promoters, that one of the TV stations in that area was actually paying them some money and giving them a really good deal to be on the station, because like Jeff showed some of the stats, even though, I don't know what the market was as far as people, but at one time there for a couple of years, on Saturday at that certain time, it was like 80 to 85% of the TVs were watching Memphis Championship Wrestling,
it's
at that
just
time.
Scary. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the thing. So this whole thing, like, again, being young, I don't understand what's going on. I'm just like, here you are. And what happened to my TV show? What happened?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it was, I was watching some Mid-South 84, and Watts was talking about, Mid-South even being seen in a million homes, on TV. And I mean, they weren't nationwide at that point. They were still just regional as far as it. We'll get to that. I mean, eventually they do become nationwide because they end up taking the time slot that McMahon had. But so we had, so we had, I think from what my understanding, maybe even Benny, you can jump in on this if you're still here, but the promise was that McMahon was going to bring in top tier matches, bring in the stars, the Hogans, the Andres, the different people like this. And I think maybe for the first couple of weeks they did get that, although a lot of it, the other problem was it was pre-taped arena stuff as opposed to in studio wrestling, which had always been the way it had been. And so that was the first turnoff. Obviously, the style was different. Of course, Georgia Championship Wrestling and different things like that. It was a hard-hitting style. It wasn't a big man territory. It was a smaller guy territory. They can move, they could wrestle, that kind of thing. It's in studio. It's quaint, is what it is. And then you get this big arena stuff. It's the big guys. It's a slower action. They're bigger stars. We'll give them that. Like the WWF, of course, had bigger stars, but it was different action than what the fans were used to. And, they quickly turned it from even the main event style matches till it was basically your throwaway star versus enhancement talent, that kind of stuff. And that really frustrated the fans. And I mean, am I accurate on that, Ted, as far as how that went?
Yeah, that's what it was. And even Georgia, and then when it went back to WCW and Jim Crockett took over, we knew the matches, 90% of the time were going to be squash matches. We were fine with that. But it was the promos. You got all these promos that are going on. And again, at the time, me not knowing that, they tape the show in the morning, Saturday morning, but it just felt like with the way the fans were there and the noise and the interaction they had, that it was going on live, even though I didn't realize till later on, but it was like you just knew something just was different. Even if there was a lot of enhancement, squash matches, still you got to see there would be an angle or two. There would be something to set up and just, or they sometimes have a brawl and they'd be going off the air and, it's like, we got to go, and, tune in, and so you got to wait a whole week to find out what happened.
Yeah. It's, and that's really what TBS wrestling became known for, was those promos, right? Like, I mean, especially when we got into the Jim Crockett era of it. I mean, that's what it was. It was like a quick 2-3 minute match. And there might have been some squash matches there, but it was intense. It was intense action. And then, then you get these promos, whether it's the Horseman or Dusty or Magnum or the Rock and Roll Express. And you're right, Ted, like that's what I love about studio wrestling. You can get a crowd in a studio that sounds louder than some of the arenas that we're seeing, AEW or WWE in right now. It's just, it always felt really live, and it felt alive, if I can put it that way, right? Benny mentioned, he was still living in New York in '84 and hated Black Saturday. He felt that McMahon was violating a sacred tradition. I that's a great comment, Benny. Like it's like kind of like, you stay away from there, right? I know what Vince was going for with, he's trying to go national. He's trying to do everything he possibly can, but that one was just kind of more, stepping on toes with that. But interestingly enough, Ted Turner right away was frustrated with the fact that what Vince had promised he was not delivering on. So he said, okay, we'll change that. And he decided to add another hour of wrestling on, I believe it was on Sunday, because Vince would have had Saturday's time slot. Yeah. And so on Sunday, he had an hour of wrestling, which eventually would have became, I think, NWA Power, NWA Pro back in the late 80s. But it was actually Mid-South Wrestling, Bill Watts Mid-South Wrestling, that took over that time slot. And it was killing it it was destroying WWF in the ratings. So people, instead of watching the 605 on Saturdays, were watching this program on Sunday. Was it 605 as well on Sundays, Ted?
I'm wanting to say it was, for some reason, and again, I don't know if it was because of the baseball and it just happened a lot, but for some reason I want to think that it came on at 5:05, but maybe it was 6:05. And the reason I remember this, and this is just an offshoot story, but I'll go ahead and tell you the reason I remember a lot of this.
Sure, we love offshoot stories.
Okay, so growing up, I had to go to church. Mom made me go to church. Okay, well, the church I went to had service all the time. They had Wednesday night, they had Sunday morning, Sunday night, and a Saturday night service. Okay, they had all these things. And my requirement was I would go Sunday morning, every Sunday morning, and I had to go one of the night services. I'm not going Wednesday night because that's in the middle of the week. Saturday night, I'm going out.
Yeah.
So I would go Sunday morning, double back, and go Sunday night. Well, then that happens where it's like, oh, the good wrestling is on Sunday. And it was like, it started at 6. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, I remember a lot of the wrestling would come on, and we only lived like 20 minutes from the church, and I would miss the last 15 to 20 minutes of it because I'm sitting there watching, and Mom's like, we got to go. We got to get in the car. We're going to be late. And I'm like, oh, just come on. Let me see what happens here. So that's how I think, like I said, it may have not always been at 5, but it may have been because of baseball. But it seems like I remember a lot of times it was on at 5 o'clock, and I was like, me and Mom would fight because I get in the car. We're going to be late. So,
Yeah. So, in that, we're talking about a very hot time for Mid-South Wrestling as well, because that's, well, ironically enough, you've got the Rock and Roll Express in Mid-South in '84. You got the Midnight Express in '84. Magnum TA as well. Ted DiBiase is coming back to the area. Junkyard Dog had been in Mid-South, but he ended up going to WWF in August of that year, which ironically enough, I'm assuming that purchase of Junkyard Dog by Vince McMahon was probably, he's probably thinking, okay, I'm going to get somebody that the fans are used to on that
Right.
channel to be on my show. But this, we're talking Junkyard Dog in 84 was not Junkyard Dog in 83, 82 or anything like that, right? He was a different character, and he was starting to lose some of his luster as well. But I'm just thinking off the top of my head, I'm thinking that's probably what the reason why he went so hard after JYD at that point. And then of course he's trying to also get a lot of the regional stars and stuff like that. But I mean, Watts is pumping out a fantastic product at that time. And here's shows you, okay, so any other station, you're probably not going to be able to do this. But Turner said, okay, after less than a year of this, he said, enough. I'm sorry, McMahon, but I'm not putting this on my station. He basically forced Vince McMahon to sell the time slot back to, well, not back to, but sold it to Jim Crockett and Jim Crockett Promotions. Yeah. And so the story is, I guess it was $1 million that he paid for it. That helped fund WrestleMania. So you have the butterfly effect of all this, right? You know, he's getting funded for WrestleMania through this, ironically enough, by putting on a crappy enough wrestling that it drove the owner of the station to force him to sell it. But what was interesting is that it's Jim Crockett that buys that time slot, not Bill Watts, even though Bill Watts was now a mainstay on that channel. I don't know. Did you know any of the story behind that and why it was Crockett that ended up with it, not Watts? It seems like Watts would have been the logical choice for that.
Well, I think from what I've heard David Crockett say on some of the podcasts he's been on with Conrad and them, you know, Mid-Atlantic had been going and, you know, and I don't know Bill Watts' financial situation, but the Crockett's did have, as a collective, between David and his brothers and his sister, because see, they owned the minor league baseball team that was there in the Carolinas. So they had, I think, a little bit more bankroll, and they were seeing what was going on too. So they were like, okay, we need to expand. And, you know, so I think I don't know if it was just the what they were offering or what they were promising or what it was, but it just seemed like from what David said, it was just a better fit that, you know, that they worked out because they wanted to expand on that. And because, you know, Mid-Atlantic was the same thing, you know, they had a good following in the Carolinas. So it was like, okay, let's try this, but I don't know all the specifics, but I know he's talked about how they really wanted that when it came available.
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ted. Was Mid-Atlantic being shown on Turner's networks at that time prior to, or was it once he bought the time slot? That's when Mid-Atlantic kind of took over that Watts time slot.
Yeah, because Mid-Atlantic at the time, you know, I do not remember it being on TBS at all. You know, it was mainly on the local stations we had. You know, you would see it on Saturday afternoon. And like I said, that was the thing. Then when Crockett buys it, then things really change, because since it's the same territory, basically, you would see the guy on 605 and then you would see him on Saturday afternoon. You know, you had that whole thing. And with the Crockett Mid-Atlantic, it was more of the, instead of the studio type wrestling, a lot of the taping would be done in the high school gymnasiums,
right?
You know, and some of those, and even those, that's another one. If you go back and watch some of those in a little high school gym and hearing the crowd react to some of the stuff, I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah. Well, and then so now we're getting into your bread and butter really with this. Like, I mean, you look back at, like, if the Rock and Roll Express would come out in some of those gymnasiums on those Mid-Atlantic programs, or Magnum TA, the crowds, like, the screaming was deafening. I put a poll up the other day, and it wasn't a joke. I asked the question, which was louder, Road Warrior pop, Hogan pop, or Rock and Roll Express pop? And I think a lot of people forget about the Rock and Roll Express pop,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, it was something. They loved them some Ricky and Robert.
yeah, exactly. It's
Well,
funny.
even in the studio,
Yes.
because a lot of times they were making their entrance while, the one guy was trying to cut a promo, and you could barely hear what they would say because of the people screaming when they would come out to the ring.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's the same thing. Like I said, I'm watching 84 Mid South, and I mean, of course, Rock and Roll Express, very prominent then. And they're doing all these like music videos for them, like, completely copyright. Forget about copyright back then. You got
Wow.
Van Halen in there, Michael Jackson, all this stuff, but they're ahead of their time doing that stuff. And but yeah, in the Irish McNeil's Boys Club, where it's small, very small. I don't know, they might have had 75, 80, or 100 fans there, but it's just so loud. And like, and something I love, and I again, you and me talk about all the time, I love the little things of wrestling. I can't stand today's product where somebody's coming for a rescue and their music plays. Like, how the hell do you know that these guys are going to come out for the rescue, right? It's like you with the invisible camera, right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
you didn't need music back then, because you could tell when somebody was coming out for a rescue, because all of a sudden, just the roar of the crowd.
Yeah.
And usually if it was the Rock and Rolls or the Fantastics or Terry Taylor that's coming out, it's just all these shrieks all of a sudden of these girls that are just going nuts because they're going to see them again for 30 seconds while they're making the run in. So it was so enjoyable. It's just unbelievable. But so we're talking here now. So McMahon sells his time slot to Jim Crockett Promotions, and lo and behold, we get something that you are extremely familiar with from that time period, and that's World Championship Wrestling. And what a time to be a wrestling fan, Ted. I mean,
yeah.
tell me about your I guess you'll say it's your favorite year of wrestling is 1986, and just watching World Championship Wrestling, the 605 and all that. But what memories can you share about that time period, just like 86, 87, 88, when NWA is cooking and smoking at that time?
Well, and that was the thing. Even with Georgia and going into World Championship Wrestling, it was just especially then it comes back. Well, I was sort of disappointed when I first saw it come back, and it was not Gordon Soley, David Crockett and Tony Schiavone, but still, they grew on me. But just to see those people that you'd seen before and you saw on Mid-Atlantic, and just the promos. And like I said, to me, my favorite year of wrestling was 86, just all the stuff. The Horsemen had just come together. Yeah. In 85 at the end of there, and just the promos and the feuds, Paul Jones and against Jimmy Valiant, that whole thing. And, just, it was just, and then you get something else, that you're like, this Great American Bash, all summer, yeah. We're going to do all these dates, and Flair's going to defend the title every time. And it was just, oh man, just so many things. And, that was the thing about, and then, you was talking about announcers, because again, no one ever touched the announcer.
Yeah.
But then during this time, we get the classic, Nikita gets mad at David Crockett and gives him the sickle, and puts him out. And, and I'd recently heard David Crockett talk about in an interview about that. And he was like, nobody knew but me and Nikita and Ivan. That was it. Nobody else around knew. And he said, and I didn't know when he was going to do it. He didn't tell me. He just said, be prepared. And David told him, I guess, lay it in. And Nikita was like, don't worry, I'm going to. you know,
I don't know anything else.
yeah. And so that was the thing, you know, those type of events. And, you know, and then the Midnight Express, you know, Cornette coming out there. And then, you know, you know, Tony Schiavone would talk about how, you know, like Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton would bring the enhancement guy over to the podium.
Yes.
And, you know, just to try to get him to pop and do something, you know, things like that. And it was just such a great time. And then, of course, you know, you get Dusty really in there because he'd showed up in Georgia from time to time, but you knew from the magazines, you knew from what you'd seen, his mainstay was Florida. Yep. Now he's coming up. And, you know, and again, I had a friend who had a friend, or his brother knew someone or something. And at the time I didn't know it, but at the end of WCW, when it listed the credits, you know, cameraman and all that,
yeah,
it had a producer title, but it went by so fast you could barely read it. And there was a Virgil Runnels listed in the credits.
Yeah.
And he told me, yeah, my brother knows somebody that was down in Florida. And he's like, that's Dusty's real name. And I'm like, what? You know, and then you start to smarten up. And you're like, okay, something fishy's going on there, you know. So, yeah, it was just crazy, you know, the whole thing. And then, like you said, it even back in Georgia when the promos, I love those, but this was just a peak time. You had so many great people that knew. And me and Taylor have talked about that. I don't know if Taylor's still in the chat, but some of the things that were ahead of its time when Pistol Pez Watley turned on Jimmy Valiant. Yeah. The angle was Jimmy Valiant referred to him as the best black wrestler he knew. Yeah, you know, or athlete. And he was like, why does it have to be black? You know, and he turns on Jimmy Valiant, you know. So even that angle for me to show the you know, the little racial tension there was ahead of its time in '86.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they were just, like I said, 86, and I'm with you, like 86 might be my favorite year of wrestling as well. And I was watching WWF at the time, and there was a lot going on there as well. But you know, they were just firing on all cylinders in '86. I mean, you know, you had some of the best promo guys of all time with the Horsemen and Flair and Arn and Tully and even Ole at that time. You know, Dusty doing his stuff. Benny had mentioned it, the World Television Championship, one of his all-time favorite titles, because it was on TV all the time, and you had some of the best in the world competing for that. You know, Arn's exchanging with Dusty back and forth, and then Tully's got a hold of it, and just there's so many good guys. And you have the national title with Buddy Landell and stuff like that, right? You know, you have the Russians, as you mentioned, you know, Nikita and Ivan and Crusher Khrushchev and all these different guys. You got the Road Warriors. We haven't even mentioned the Road Warriors at this time.
Oh, yeah. And the first time I saw them in Georgia, you know, when they made that appearance, you know, and that's another thing that people don't, you know, when we talk about these great stables, we don't talk about, you know, why were they called the Road Warriors, but why were they also called the Legion of Doom? Because that was the stable that Paul Ellering had them in. You know, you had the Road Warriors, Jake the Snake Roberts, King Kong Bundy for a bit, and I want to say maybe the Spoiler or the Grappler. It was one of the masked guys that showed up with him or something. But, you know, they called their whole collective the Legion of Doom. Yeah. And so, yeah, then the Road Warriors show back up in WCW during the 80s there. And just the angle. Oh, and, you know, even the Best of Seven series, you know, I thought that was a unique concept between Magnum and Nikita for the U.S. title. Yeah. And everybody just knew that Magnum was going to win, but he didn't, you know, so that was just something wild.
Yeah. So, all right. So we've had a run in here now. You know, we're talking Jim Crockett Promotions 86, all full of run-ins during interviews. And here we go. We got a run in right here. We've got Andy the Taxman from Grappling with Canada. Benny was quite excited to see you, Taxman, in the house. Ted, you'll appreciate this comment from Benny as well. Pez just happened to have a pair of scissors in his trunks, right? Probably your favorite feud of all time is Pez Watley and Jimmy Valiant. And
I love
there are
Pez Watley.
8,000 different hair matches and Paul Jones' army against them. But Andy, how you doing, brother? Good to see you here.
Good. I'm doing good. Thanks very much, BC, for having me on. Ted, great to see you again, brother.
You too, man.
I've been following a little bit in the car ride here, so we'll see. Hopefully, I don't get too lost in the shuffle here. But no, I'm thrilled to be a part of this historic discussion tonight. Yeah, Ted Turner, man, that's just wild news out of nowhere. I knew he had some health issues, but man, what a loss.
Yeah. We like we said, we were talking earlier, Andy, just about the legacy of Ted Turner. I mean, there's many who have done some tribute episodes on him and stuff like that, but more so how he's been connected, so entwined with the wrestling industry, and just really he really brought the wrestling industry up as far as Southern wrestling, if you want to call it that, but wrestling as a whole, territory wrestling, and his association with Georgia Championship Wrestling, with Jim Crockett Promotions, even with Bill Watts and Mid-South Wrestling. Now, I know, Andy, you weren't, obviously watching, JCP in 1986, a little bit before your time, but obviously through the beauty of the WWE Vault and the Peacock and all that good stuff, you probably tuned into some of that old school wrestling. Any thoughts on that time period of wrestling, like 605? The Jim Crockett Promotions, Dusty, Flair, Horseman, all those guys. We were just chatting about the Horsemen, and Ted was talking about the Road Warriors and the Legion of Doom. For me, I'll just think of Hawk at that podium with Tony Schiavone and flexing his neck and the collar popping off. But Andy, what about your thoughts on that time period?
I mean, so yes, it predates my live wrestling experience. I was only a year old at that time, so fresh out the oven, as the kids say. I think that's the proper term. But honestly, what sticks out to me in that era was, outside of Dusty and Flair in the promos, because that's one of the top things, but the tag teams of that era are what really stick out to me. And you could go legitimately through, I mean, make a top 10 list of tag teams of all time. They're probably residing in that 84 to 80, I'll even go 88 era of Crockett into what would be the NWA, then on to WCW. But yeah, that's those two things, right? The promos from the heavy hitters and just the absolute machines of tag team wrestling that were in that era. That's what really sticks out to me. And that's what I find myself going back to watch, right? Especially, man, the Road Warriors, what a phenomenon, right? And just the way that they were presented. And yeah, I mean, talking about promos as well. I mean, interesting to say the least. But just absolute, just great stuff. And just the tag teams. I think that is what really draws me in, to be honest.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, to me, Ted, you were just touching on it. The kings of the studio wrestling tag teams were the Midnight Express, and you were talking about, Bobby or Dennis dragging the guys over to the podium, and just bring the enhancement talent over there. And I mean, they were just so fun to watch in that era. Like, I mean, the guys that were the most fun were the Midnight Express, Tully, because Tully was just like just a wild man, like as far as like he's like a rabbit mongoose or something like that, but just amazing. But obviously the Road Warriors, just for what they were, their mystique, the Four Horsemen, Flair, Arn, but the Midnight Express, man, like they it seems like every time I flick on something on YouTube where my go-to is either Mid-South or it's Jim Crockett Promotions. If I'm like, you know what, I'm bored, I want to watch some wrestling, that's what I'm going to, right? And it seems like the Midnight Express is always on there, and they're always just stomping a mud hole in some poor enhancement talent. And Bobby's doing every move possible he knows or whatever, and yet it's still believable, and it's it's good. Ted, I mean, you're a massive Midnight Express fan. You know, we talked about the Express on our tribute episode to Dennis Condrey. What are your thoughts on the Midnights as far as that era?
I mean, yeah, and again, you get two guys that don't have to say a word because Cornette's going to say everything for them.
Yes,
and and he would be over there. Sometimes he would be even like a guest host, and just the intensity and what he brought to that thing. And then those guys, like I said, you knew they were going to get the heat, and you knew that they were going to beat these guys up, and they were going to go after, like you said, because all these people love the Rock and Roll Express. So when you get the Midnight Express continually beating them down or doing something, to them, and it was so easy for people not to like them, and that's what they wanted. That's what they were after, and just the teamwork, and like you said, the tag teams. And then I also, and I've mentioned this before, I loved how the rotation of the tag teams and how things, because you could have, Midnight and Rock and Roll feud for a few months. Then the Rock and Roll feuds with, at the time, Tully was doing more singles, and it was Arn and Ole. And then the Midnight would feud with the Road Warriors, and you can switch it up. Or the Midnight would feud with Dusty and Magnum when they weren't chasing singles things. And you just had all those great different combinations that you could switch around and rotate and make things fresh. Because, even though the match itself was not the greatest match, but still, you have the scaffold match with the Road Warriors and the Midnight Express. And the funniest part of that is the training video that the Midnight Express did for that, which you can see the video, which does have a little bit of a copyright block on it. It's not being allowed to seen in Russia, Ubistan, and some of them other countries that YouTube won't let me do it, but it is on my channel.
Yeah. That's a good, actually, it's a good time since we're in the midst of this. Why don't you take time to promote your channel, Ted, and Andy, I'll get you to do the same in a second here, but let people know where they can find you.
Ted's Takes on Wrestling. You go there. Mainly I concentrate on shorts, and Andy, you will appreciate this one. I just put up one where it's called Arn Anderson, the Taxman promo, where he actually mentions his Taxman.
Yeah.
And so that's a little cute one. And Tully's, just put one up at Tully's. So, I try to put a lot of those old promos up. Some of those with Hulk, where he talks about deviating septums back in the day. That was always a favorite one of mine. Deviating a septum, and just some of those things. So I love putting up some of those old promos. I do have a Midnight Rider one up there, and I've had a lot of comments, about is that really Dusty Rhodes? Some of them, so tongue in cheek, but still, those type of things.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. Ted's Takes on Wrestling. Make sure you go over there and subscribe and support Ted. Andy, obviously, Grappling Canada. Where can folks find you at?
Yeah, so if you're on this wonderful YouTube program that you're watching right now, after this is done, use that YouTube search bar, search for Grappling with Canada. For those who are unfamiliar, it's a deep dive, in-depth look at individuals in the lexicon of Canadian professional wrestling. BC was very gracious to join me for a few episodes, including one holiday spectacular that still ranks as one of my favorite episodes that we ever did. Also, we did the Immortal Hulk Hogan tribute episode, which was a ton of fun, which I still get a ton of feedback for. Excellent feedback for, I should say. But yes, Grappling with Canada. You can also download it on Spotify, YouTube, wherever. What do I always say? Wherever you buy, sell, trade, barter, or steal your favorite podcast, you'll find Grappling with Canada.
Yeah, for sure. You'll appreciate too, Andy. We had a mention of Ed Whalen earlier. We were talking about the Mount Rushmore of wrestling announcers. Unfortunately, Ed didn't make our Mount Rushmore. I was more so talking about how you kind of like to no-sell the wrestlers more so than some of the guys.
You know what? In terms of personality that helped get wrestling onto a cable television, you could very strongly draw similarities between Ted Turner and Ed Whalen. Now, obviously, there's the money issue. Ed Whalen was not a billionaire and never professed to be. But the reason that Stampede had their run in large part was due directly to Ed Whalen. So, as far as people think that there might not be a lot of similarity, there is some. You gotta find the little threads between them two.
It's wrestling. You'll always find a thread somewheres, right?
Absolutely.
And folks, if you're watching this channel and you're not a subscriber as of yet, make sure you do subscribe. These two gentlemen are all over my channel as well. Ted's participated in a ton of what if conversations. Some of my favorite conversations are the what ifs, and what if Magnum TA didn't have his accent? What if David Von Erich hadn't passed away at the age that he did? Talking territories, different things like that. And of course, Andy has participated in a mega series that we did on the essential Hulk Hogan matches that everybody should see. And we tackle it in a 4-part series, taking each era of Hogan's run, and just really enjoyable conversation that we had. So, if you love these beautiful faces that you're seeing right now, you can see more of them if you go through the video library that I have going on. But Benny mentioned somebody else that, very synonymous with the 605, gets knocked a lot, but I loved Ronnie Garvin and the Hands of Stone gimmick. And Hands of Stone, Ronnie Garvin, a lot of people, if they only know Ronnie Garvin from his WWF run, they're sorely missing out.
Yeah. And the funniest thing I used to love about Ronnie Garvin, proud Canadian that he was, he would always talk about being a proud U.S. citizen and talk about the United States and things like that. And I'm like, okay, so our countries grew on you, being from Canada,
It's almost like Vince McMahon was booking him.
Yeah.
Now residing in, yeah.
How many Canadians over the years have been from anywhere but the Vince McMahon booking?
That's what they should have announced them from anywhere but Canada. Chris Jericho. Unreal. But yeah, Ronnie Garvin, man, like there's another tough hombre that was no nonsense, and his build up in '86 with his battles with Flair. Like, I know he got the title in '87, but that just kind of felt off to me. That was kind of like everything that happened with Magnum in '86 kind of really altered the timeline of '87. But in '86, you could believe that Ronnie Garvin, one, was a legit contender to Ric Flair's title and could possibly take it off of him.
Yeah, and I recently heard David Crockett again talk about that. And they were asking about, what was the decision? And he was like, with Magnum and everything going on, he was like, do we really just want to go with Dusty again? Everybody's seen that. So it was like, let's take a shot on Garvin. But he even admitted we may have waited a little bit too late because he peaked in '86. Yeah. And then by the time '87, it had already started to wane a little bit. But it was that thing of like, okay, let's try it and see what happens.
They really pushed the panic button in '86 when everything went down with Magnum. And I think they just needed to step back a little bit and go, okay, well, let's just regroup here. Let's figure out what we got to do. I mean, it's okay if we leave the title on Flair, but they turned Nikita babyface, which he was just such a hot heel at the time. Yeah. They're blowing through that match at Starrcade. You have '87. You're putting the title on Garvin just so you can get another title win for Flair. If they had to just step back a bit, I think the guy to go to at the time would have been Barry Windham in '87. Yeah. They could have done the exact same run they were planning out for Magnum with Barry Windham. He was top 3 wrestler in the world at that time in '87, but it's hindsight's 2020, but it's just it's interesting. But you could argue that that's kind of what led to the downfall of WCW or of Jim Crockett Promotions, because we talk about by 1988 Jim Crockett Promotions is being purchased by Ted Turner himself. And, that, you could say that, like, a lot of people will crap on, I get a lot of comments on the video that we talked about, the what if, and they're like, oh, Magnum was never going to get it, or it doesn't matter. The WWF was a juggernaut and they were doing this, that, and the other thing. But you don't understand. I always say to people, you don't understand if you weren't there at the time, it's really hard to understand what an effect it would have had. And I'm not saying that Jim Crockett Promotions would have took over WWF. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that Jim Crockett Promotions might have been a lot more healthy and maybe stuck with what they were doing well. But, when you throw the panic button in there and you're changing your script up on the fly, it hurts everything. And so things started to go downhill in 87. We're going into 88. The money woes are starting to get there because they purchased the UWF, formerly Mid-South Wrestling, from Bill Watts. They try to merge that all together, and that doesn't go so well. People always talk about the whole, storyline with WWE when they purchased WCW and how the invasion angle. Well, I'm telling you, the UWF storyline didn't go so well either. It's very similar, very reminiscent. It's funny, the guys who win the battle never usually like to put the other company over. It's just the way it goes. Yeah. But they did get a few stars from that. One of them being Sting was one of them. There you go.
There it is.
Scott Steiner, or Rick Steiner being another. There's some great stars that they got, but 88, 89, it's being taken over. It's purchased by Ted Turner. You start to get the influence of the people running it are more the corporate people, and you get people like Jim Herd in there. And by 89, you're probably getting your last great year of World Championship Wrestling, as it's been renamed at this point. What are your thoughts on that last couple of years from both of you, like the 88, 89 era, where we're moving into 1990 as well, and it's starting to take that dive down?
Yeah, I just want to expand a little bit on that aspect of it, because yes, as you said, you get the comments on your channel that, oh, WWF was this big juggernaut, and that's the common perception at that time, warranted or not. WCW hitting the panic button, as you said, that's an apt description, because realistically they didn't have to jump into that UWF purchase, and that's what it ended up being. Bill Watts made out pretty good, as the stories go, but it really changed their trajectory from a Southern regional. And people say that, and they say it in a negative connotation. I don't think they really should.
No.
When you see this, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a diatribe, so please forgive me a little bit. But it's not a bad thing to have your base audience that you can expand on. And,
yes.
But you can't forget about the base audience. You see it nowadays. That's exactly what's happening. So with WCW going forward with the UWF purchase, they forgot about their base audience. They weren't super serving them, which is what they should have been. Even if they made the purchase, you could still super serve your audience, expand that southernly, right? Yeah, you got the big bad boys up north, or whatever, however you want to phrase it. But it doesn't mean that you need to go head to head and compete with them automatically. And that was a big, big misstep. So you had, like you said, the misstep of completely falling off a cliff when TA got hurt, right? That was a big misstep. Nobody knew what direction to go. The UWF was a misstep. And then getting away from serving their core audience was the third one that really killed their business.
Yeah. Yeah. Ted?
Yeah. And like I said, people who didn't grow up in that area don't realize the reach that Crockett WCW had at that time, because, growing up, and I don't know anymore, but back then it was the Dallas Cowboys were called themselves America's team because they were always on some channel you could watch football. The Braves were actually called America's team there for a little while too, even though
that's right.
they they weren't good, but because of the reach that TBS had, everybody knew who the Braves were. And it was the same thing. You could be, and a lot of the guys from Crockett and them talked about, if they would have not tried to expand and go out west, and I'm going to use another example of a entity that was really popular in the 90s. And once they tried to expand and they lost their base, because at one time, and a lot of people may not believe this, I don't know what it is now because I don't follow it, but in the 90s and the 80s, the ratings for NASCAR were outrageous.
Right.
Then when they tried to expand and they forgot their core audience and they started going to all these Western tracks and all these other places, it started to go downhill.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of similarities in that. And like you said, they weren't serving the base audience. And then you also had the thing, David Crockett, again, he's talked about Jimmy, his brother, who was the president, the main owner. He had some marriage things, and then he basically moved and set his main office up in Dallas, Texas.
Yeah.
So that sort of hurt things, and that when he bought the UWF, and he sort of stayed out in that area, and it was just the money, and they were trying to say, and instead of being that, and I know people, again, you can say whatever you want, but AEW is never going to be bigger than WWE.
Mm-hmm.
But their goal is that competitor brand. Burger King's never going to be bigger than McDonald's. But you got to have the competitor brand to have something. That was the thing with Crockett. No, they weren't going to be bigger than the WWF. But you needed that other entity that was making a profit and being able to be there and expand. And, and that happens sometimes is when you try to go too much into it and face someone head on, it can cost you.
Yep. Completely agree. Both of you with great points. Like I say, I agree with you, Andy. I hate how there's like a stink on it. Like, it's a Southern wrestling promotion. Well,
I can't stand that.
That's the type of wrestling it was, and it's some of the greatest wrestling that you'll ever watch. That's the thing, right? Each area has their own regional flair to it, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it's unfortunate when there was the takeover by Turner and the purchase of Jim Crockett Promotions. He's now putting that corporate side in. And of course, what does corporate do? They're like, well, let's look at who's number one. And what are they doing? Well, they're doing this, and they're doing it well. So, we got to copy them. And to your point, Ted, you don't have to copy. You just have to be a challenger brand. But your challenger is, you can be that annoying gnat that does things really well the way you're doing them, instead of trying to do what they do very poorly. And that's what it always came off as, like I think of angles like, Big Josh and people like that. Right. And, Canadian wrestler that we're all familiar with, Muck and Singh, goes down there as Norm the Lunatic, and, and Trucker Norman, or whatever the heck he was. And all these different things where it's like, they're doing WWF, but you can't do WWF. They're the number one at it. It's just like now that WWE is trying to do what other promotions are doing, they're not doing it the best either, right? So it's like, stick to what works. But it got kind of gloomy there for a little while. Now there was
Bleak is the way to go.
Yeah. I mean, there was some bright spots, but unfortunately, it gets forgotten about with all the poor spots. But we talk about '89 when you get the Flair run of '89 with Steamboat and in the trilogy that they had, and then his run with Terry Funk with the Great Muta. I mean, there's just to me, that might be Flair's best year of wrestling, ironically enough.
Yeah, and even that whole thing, because that time period, you get Tony Schiavone jumps to the WWF and becomes an announcer there for a year. You
should have stayed there, in my opinion.
Oh, watch out.
We're gonna go. I hope we talk about that later, but I'll save my tongue till then.
Arn and Tully, go up there, the Brainbusters, and, they have success. But then you start to see, and like you said, Flair has that great run. And then what happens? Flair jumped ship for a brief moment there. So, it was a lot of stuff going on. And then even the 90s, you were talking about tag team. That was another thing that, you get out of the Mid-South and all that. We did get the, the Steiner brothers to come on the scene there.
Yeah. I mean, could we consider maybe like the Steiners to be the last great real tag team that we got from that era? Like, I don't know. Like, I know the WWE tag team scene was there, but it got pretty poor into the 90s, when we get into that new generation era. You had, like, during the Nitro era, you had some good tag teams, like Harlem Heat and stuff like that. But the Steiners, that was tag team at its finest, right?
I'm trying to think of the year besides the Steiners. Would have also been before Harlem Heat, Doom.
Yeah, they would have been 1990, yeah.
That would have been another good one, but it wasn't looking well. Then you got the late 80s there, the different version of the Midnight Express with Sweet Stan Lane. He coming along there. But it wasn't. The Steiners, as far as really great, that may have been the last one out of that era that really popped up.
Yeah.
Andy, you don't get many until the early 90s then at that point.
Yeah. It's slim pickings for a while there, for sure.
I'm drawing a complete blank, but who did Dr. Death Steve Williams tag with?
Terry Gordy.
Yeah, that was in that 90s. That was the tournament, correct?
Well, and I was just gonna go to that as well, okay. Andy.
I'm jumping the gun.
No. Actually, it's the next thing that popped in my head and this kind of starting to get more towards your area as well. I mean, we get into the early 90s, and Eric Bischoff comes in as an announcer, and eventually he's going to end up getting that role as, I forget what his title was, if it was president or whatever it was. But anyways, he's running WCW is what he's doing. But it is such a weird time. This is what I'm going back to. It's unfortunate. People look back at that era of, say, like 19. I'm not even going to count 90 because I didn't think 90 was that bad a year either for WCW. But 91 to 94 when we get into the Hogan era, right? But people look back on that poorly. Yet you had things like you just talked about, Andy, Gordy and Williams, the Miracle Violence Connection, just putting on amazing matches with the Steiner brothers. You have Luger and Sting still going pretty good. You have who else? Dustin Rhodes, some great matches he's putting on. You got Steve Austin, you got Ricky Steamboat, you got Rick Rude, you got all these different.
The Hollywood Blondes come in the scene, right? Yeah.
And then again, even though it was too short-lived, one of my favorite stables, the Dangerous Alliance, and then you had that team up of that other great tag team, Larry Zbyszko and Arn Anderson. Who would have ever thought they would have been tagging together?
Yeah, for sure.
But I mean, like, even outside of that, you have singles like Cactus Jack was a maniac, right? Like Vader, although was short-lived. We maybe get into the Paul Orndorff thing later, but I mean, there was a lot of great stuff. Too bad it's mired in some poor happenstance. And then that's the other thing that, like, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, but like this consistent revisionist history, right? And you know what? I love Cornette. BC, you're a big Cornette guy as well. Yeah. But you even listen to Cornette talk about when he talks about WCW from 89 forward. It's like it was trash. There's nothing good there. He buries it consistently, but it's like and sometimes with good reason. Like Bill Ding, not a great idea.
No.
Or the Ding Dongs, right? Not a great idea. But when you're looking at solo stars that came out of that era that we're still talking about today, there's a lot of them.
Yeah. Like how about Ron Simmons being your world champion,
Bingo.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The Flair storyline with Vader when he comes back to WCW after going to WWF, right? The problem is, as WWF goes, so does the wrestling world go. And unfortunately, in that 92, 93 era, WWF wasn't exactly hit on all cylinders either. You have the end of the Hogan run, and you're in that rebuilding phase for WWF. So people think of it overall. And you're right, Andy, like you had some really terrible gimmicks, which of course all have like, corporate stamped on them. And then you still have, the bookers, and I forget who it was booking at that time in 91 to 93. I don't know if it was Sullivan or if it was who had a hand in that, but I mean, you had some fantastic wrestling at that point too. I think of like
Ole Anderson at that point, I believe.
Yeah, it could be. And I mean, you've got, of course, the Black Scorpion was horrible. But I mean, like you say, you've got Gordy and Williams, and you've got, the Steiner brothers. They put on some of the most physical matches you've ever seen. Sting and Luger. I still remember the Sting and Luger against the Steiner brothers in a babyface matchup. Flair, Vader, Cactus Jack, just there's some good stuff. And it's unfortunate it gets tarnished in that time frame.
And I think though the whole thing though, as we the pendulum, also I think the culture changed because you're coming out of the 80s, Miami Vice, you're coming out of all this 80s music, hair metal, and then people start to change. So I blame grunge. I think that's why wrestling.
I blame it for everything. I blame grunge for everything.
Yeah, it's Pearl Jam's fault that wrestling went down. I'm sorry, but it was just a whole culture shift too, where wrestling wasn't cool as much anymore. I think and it started to go, and and then it had to just teeter there for a while until the Attitude Era, and then it starts back up again. So.
Yeah, well, let's get into that. So, we go from building and the ding dongs and stuff like that, and WCW is in some rough territory at that point. But what do? They swing for the fences. They bring in the guy, the man himself, Hulk Hogan, gets signed by WCW, and we're not talking about Hulk Hogan of 1986 when he's at the top of his game. We're talking about Hulk Hogan who just went through, the whole steroid trial situation. He was turned on by the fans basically for playing his, his creative control card a little bit too much as WWF was trying to get into that new generation stuff. So he wasn't exactly, the fans' choice at that time, but him going to WCW in 1994 was massive in my eyes. Like that's something that I was not ever expecting to see, was Hulk Hogan with WCW. And at that time, WCW not being at the top of their game, like you say, they were rough at that point. For both of you, what was that like when you see, as we see in the picture, Hulk Hogan signing with WCW, shaking hands with Ted Turner? And the one thing I will give them credit for, and Andy, we talked about this during our Hogan episode, right off the get-go, they gave us the match that we were begging WWF to give us, Flair and Hogan. So what were your guys' thoughts when that happens?
So I'll say for myself, it made WCW seem relevant again.
Yeah.
And it made him seem like they were actually willing to play, if that makes any sense. Because, again, we had, and it didn't end at this point. I don't want to make it seem like they got Hulk Hogan and we're off to the races. They definitely were not, and we could probably get into that after. But it really seemed at this point. So predating this, you had Macho Man come in, right?
Yeah.
You had Flair come back.
Mean Gene.
Exactly, Mean Gene. So you had some credibility. You had a lot of sway. And signing Hogan, although at that point wasn't exactly a fan favorite, it still signified that, hey, we got the big fish. Because whatever you think about him, if you're still, early 90s, if you're thinking about wrestling, you're thinking about Hulk Hogan. So it's a huge move, highly underrated.
Yeah. Ted?
I thought it was good for them from a business standpoint. It was shocking. I knew what Hogan meant to the business, but being a Horseman and a Flair guy, I automatically thought, okay, Flair's not going to be the top dog anymore, and that was sort of disappointing on that. But from a business side, it was like, okay, because by then how old am I then? In my early 20s and and trying to keep up with it. And you're like, okay, so maybe this can be a turnaround, so you're excited for that. But then, it's like, okay, what's going to happen here? Let's just wait and see how it's going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you on that. Yeah. For me, it was so weird. It was weird to see Hogan in WCW, and I didn't know what it was going to lead to, if it's going to be good or bad. To me, Hogan had lost a bit of shine in my eyes at that point. Savage being there too was definitely weird as well. But it was smart that they picked up those two guys. And I was hopeful, I guess I could say. I was hopeful about what was going to happen as far as WCW, because I didn't want them to fail. And that's the thing. We see so much of today's product that fans are just so anti this, anti that, and they want everything to fail. But I don't want anybody to fail. I just want it to be all good. You know what I mean? Like I just want to be able to. I want to be back to a time when I'm like, geez, I don't know which one I should watch. They're both awesome.
Yeah.
I guess I'm gonna have to tape one and watch the other, or flip back and forth. But I like it's not enjoyable for me to have 14 different wrestling companies and they all suck. You know what I mean? But I don't wish them to be.
They know?
I don't wish them to be out of business. That's the thing, because I want somebody who gets told you're going to take a 50% pay cut to be able to say, well, screw you, I'm going to go to these guys and I'm going to get paid the amount that I'm going to get paid, right? So that's the thing. Any thought, by the way, since we're talking modern a little bit, any thoughts on what's going on with that whole pay situation with the WWE from either of you?
From everything, I mean, I wasn't a big, didn't follow UFC and all that, but from a lot of different commentator podcast things, I've heard that a lot of people expected this when TKO took over the UFC. That was the first thing they did, was cut legends, cut people. It's all about the bottom line. So, then I hear it's like, okay, here we are here. I guess it's not surprising that it's just changed. It's not about legacies. It's not about who your fan favorite is. It's all about the bottom line. And, it's very corporate, very corporate.
Yeah.
I just want to touch on, in terms of WWE people having to restructure their deals. I mean, you go from wrestling 200 dates a year to what do they do now? A handful.
Yeah.
Did anybody think that wasn't going to have some kind of effect on the bottom line? Like, I mean, you see it in the product. You see it with, people getting hurt consistently now. Never used to happen like this. The elimination of the house show business in terms of just servicing a bottom line was a bad idea. And you're starting to see all that come to roost now. And now it's going to fall on the talent because, man, we're paying you X amount for 200 days. Well, you ain't working 200 days. You're working 55. So let's prorate that. So unfortunately I kind of seen it coming, but it's just a bad look, just generally a bad look.
And I come from the world of business, and I mean, of course, there's going to be times that companies are restructuring and stuff like that, but it's a horrible look when you're reporting record profits too, right? That's it's the balance with that. I'm not, on the wagon of like some fans that are just like, oh my God, I can't believe they've cut, Kofi Kingston. He should have been there for life. It's like, no, like, I mean, I don't know if you ever watched territory wrestling back in the day, but guys would be there for 6 months and they're moving on to somewhere else, you know. And there is places to move on to. You can't keep everybody. You're going to have a bloated roster, and you're going to run out of stories for these people. So I get that. It's just the way the optics of how they did it is just not good. And I really hope AEW isn't planning on snapping up all 20 something of these people, because they don't need 2 more people on that roster right now. Just focus on your roster. But anyways, that's my little thing about get off the modern product. So yeah. So
I like it.
So, you know, I don't want to spend too much time belaboring like the Attitude Era and stuff like that. We all know what the Attitude Era is. This is more so on what Turner brought to it. But of course, what Turner, when they made the merger with ALL, Time Warner, all this stuff, it brought a lot of money to wrestling is what it did. And it brought, and one thing, he was always supportive of the wrestling. So when Eric Bischoff goes into his office and he's talking to him and he says to him, what do we need to do to compete with the WWF or the WWE or at the time? The WWF at the time.
WWF, yeah.
Yeah. We got to go live against them on Monday night. So what do we get? We get Monday Nitro. And I mean, that was ballsy, I got to say. And it although people seem to think as soon as the moment Monday Nitro happened, the Monday Night War was off into the races. Well, no, it wasn't. No. It still was struggling at that point. And we talked about it, Andy. We went through the Dungeon of Doom days on Monday Nitro, and we went through the Hogan fake black era for him. So it was a rough time. But
can I interject and pause you just real quick?
Yeah.
Because the one thing that we didn't talk about during our Hogan episodes was kind of into the weeds about how this all happened, the how Nitro came to be. And so, as I did many times, and which I will do now, and you know exactly where I'm going, BC, I'm going to plug this.
I'm going to take a shot, book. Andy. I'm going to take a shot.
There it is. Yeah. So everybody, I will as well. So if you're having a beverage or you're having whatever, every time I mention this book, there it is. The Nitro book, this incredible book by Guy Evans. Have a drink and we'll see who's left standing at the end of the show here. However, what they go into great depth and detail in the book is, yes, the conversation about Bischoff getting the head-to-head live on Mondays, right? Game changer. What it also goes into is how now the corporate side has to deal with, you guys are stuck with wrestling now.
Yeah.
Because the corporate side for years before this was watching that bottom line, you know, year on year, you know, it's they're in the red, they're hemorrhaging money, they're bleeding money, they're putting money losing assets from Ted Turner Enterprises, things that have nothing to do with WCW on the WCW bottom line, right? To just tank they call it EBITDA, and there's a technical term for it, but it's essentially their earnings reported yearly, right?
Yeah.
So
earned but not yet incurred.
Exactly. So they're just doing everything they can on the corporate side because they don't want this Rasslin. It's nonsense to them. So not only does Ted Turner give Eric Bischoff 2 hours live on Mondays, he signals to the corporate side that you guys now have 2 hours on Monday and you guys got to make it work with Bischoff. And it sets up a whole chain of events on the corporate side. And you have all these people scurrying around like Siegel, and who's the other one?
Kip Fry or something like that.
Yeah, Kip Fry predated this a little bit, but it was Siegel and it was where is it now? Yeah, Rob Rusin and somebody else. But anyways, they're now in panic mode because they never wanted this thing. Now they're tied to it. And now their salaries are tied to the success of this business going 2 hours live. So there was a whole bunch of machinations backstage and in the back rooms of the corridors of Ted Turner's, what would that be? The CNN towers, or what did they used to call it?
Yep.
Anyways, of people trying to figure out how to make this thing work because their asses run, sorry for the swearing, but they're on the line too at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And you know, it was I mean, it's not just TBS, this is on TNT at this point, right? Which is again another national real sports based network. And it's you know, it really changed how the production of wrestling was going on too. I mean, WWF had always been known as the ultimate in production value as far as their product, and all of a sudden now you've got a true competitor who's putting on just as good a product at that time with a little bit more edge as well at that time. And you know, the fact that I forget who mentioned it, but they talked about the difference being Vince McMahon, the money guy for WWF, and the owner and running the show, his hands are all over that product. Ted Turner, the money guy, he's just like, here's the money, go do it. Just don't lose too much money, right? And that's a big difference. So now you've got a chance, if you have wrestling people running the show, to really just go wild, as they talked about. They called it ATM Eric and stuff like that. But unfortunately, as you mentioned, Andy, you now have this going on because you got a bunch of suits are like, I don't want this product here, and we're going to do everything we can to just throw all of our non-performing assets into it. And then you got, meanwhile, a newish executive running the show who's probably not realizing what kind of a bear trap he's walking into really with this, right? But,
well, now on the other side of it too, you also have, like you guys had mentioned earlier about the Braves, right? You own the Braves. Yep. You also own the Atlanta Hawks.
Yes.
So all of the NBA production staff were then brought into WCW. That's why if you watch the show, like from a filmography standpoint, it looks quite a bit different from WWF.
Yeah.
You know, when you have Bucky Beaver himself running things for the WWF, and you have a high-end, you know, a sports-based production team that's used to covering live sports in a certain way. That's why it looked differently as well. But again, now you have corporate mad because their people, quote unquote, are being used for this Rasslin that they just desperately wanted to die.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to this, you know, as we're talking about Ted Turner, was when he first bought WCW, even when he first got it there, those corporate people in his ear did not want wrestling. You know, they were talking about that. Tony Schiavone, David Crockett were saying that all these meetings, they hated it. And he finally just told them, you know, again, because he credited the 605 and the wrestling for helping his channel and helping bring eyeballs to the Braves and Andy Griffith and helping him to expand. And it's like, he was not going to give up on it. You know, he was going to keep it. And then, like he was saying, then he turned it around as it even got more corporate. And as the AOL people come in and the different things, it's like, no, you guys are going to help this. And they did not like that. But it was like, that was his vision until he completely lost all power, was that there's going to be wrestling on my network.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just want to interject again one time because I found the part that I was looking at in my everybody take a drink. Here we go in the Nitro book. Bill Burke was the other name that I was looking at I meant to. So I just want to read you this quick excerpt because it really does talk about the headbutting between the corporate side, not just the corporate side of Ted Turner, but the corporate side of TNT versus TBS, which I think is something that should be said as well. So just a quote from here. They were trying to differentiate between TNT and TBS. TBS was more fun, like baseball, wrestling, movies. TNT was what they wanted to be, like the Tiffany Network. So now, instead of these individuals like Tom Kirsch getting their way with TNT being the way that they wanted it to run. Now all of a sudden they're saddled with wrestling.
Yeah.
So again, like you have corporate interests that want their point of view to go a certain way with an entire network, and now Big Ted's walking in, and here you go, you're saddled with it. So I just wanted to put that in there real quick.
Yeah.
And again, have your drink, everybody.
And the other thing going along with that, you're going from a 6:05 time slot, and then your syndicated show on Sunday, to now Monday night prime time at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And again, that's prime real estate that they're having to deal with. So that's another thing. It's like, you mean, okay, we can live with this being on Saturday afternoon, but you're wanting us to show this on prime time on a Monday night?
Yeah, we could be putting a Braves game, or we could be putting a Hawks game, or or even they control the Atlanta Thrashers, the NHL team, so they've been putting that or something on there too. But yeah, and isn't it ironic how it kind of mimics what's happening right now with WWE with the whole ESPN deal, right? Like, come on, like you don't think ESPN looks at WWE as their dirty little cousin, that they don't even want to talk about, compared to, it's very similar to what TNT and WCW was. And I know, WWE is huge and they're worldwide, but still mainstream companies still think it's just wrestling, right? It's not real sports, right?
How dare you air your wrestling highlights in between our baseball highlights?
Yeah.
That's what it boils down to, right?
Yeah, what is a Danhausen anyway? I'm sure somebody's saying it.
Oh, watch out, you might get cursed.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh yeah. So it's just so obviously we don't need to talk about all the highs and lows of the actual booking of WCW. That's more so on that side of it. What we do know is we got some of the best times to be a wrestling fan at that time, at that period of time throughout the 90s. When you have the Attitude Era and you have the NWO on WCW, and you have Austin and The Rock and DX and all that stuff on WWE, WWF. But when exactly, and Andy, you probably know this answer, when was it that Turner finally got ousted from his own company, which is just kind of insane as far as that goes, as far as the power struggle went? Was it 2000 or was it 2001? No,
it was actually before that. So when you're really, like, truthfully, Ted Turner started losing power in 1998.
Okay.
So that's when that's when this whole thing, so the worst merger in television history, and it's still dragging, and we are 2026, 98, so we are I can't, my math is not mathing right now, but what we about 30
nearly 30 years
of this, just, and it's not done yet. It's gone down in history as the worst merger in history for businesses, Time Warner. And the other thing is that Ted Turner didn't realize that he was losing control of his companies as it was happening.
Yeah.
Right. Again, you're talking about a lot of these backdoor deals. You have a lot of people in his ear going, this is going to be great. We're going to dominate the news skylines, which is really the way that they brought him into it, was like the news dominance, right? CNN was huge. That was really the flagship at the time, right? Time Warner could revolutionize the television and news experience. That's what it was billed as to him. Meanwhile, you had people in the background staking majority shares, crippling the stocks that were available, really rewriting the bylaws of the company. So when it came down to purchasing, and they killed it, they moved him out. Like he didn't realize what was happening till it was too late.
Yeah.
But truthfully, 98 is when like it was over. By 2001, he was officially out.
Yeah.
But 98, the writing was on the wall. And again, everybody grab a drink. But they go. There's three chapters in this book that highly detail all the intra-office emails that were between all of these different big players that did not include Ted Turner. So they were all talking about it, right? Whether it was Siegel to the head of Warner Brothers, whether it was, who's the other one here? You know what? I don't need to read the book on air. That's terrible television, as they say. But all of these inter-office emails, and they're all detailed, and they've all been FOIA'd, and they're all in here. Yeah. But it shows you just how these people just are behind the scenes. Just how do we get him out of here? How do we get him out of here? And before he knew what was happening, he was out. And he was out before he was officially out. That's a long way of saying that. Yeah. And just a shame.
And the other thing, when you're talking about the Monday Night War and that error, the other thing that they were doing there that was also unprecedented that I thought was, because I could watch Monday Night Raw, because then Nitro did a replay immediately after the show went off the air. So basically you were taking up all this time space, you know, and it was like, that was just, to me, I just thought that was crazy. So I could, if I want to watch Raw, I can watch it. And if I want to stay up real late, I can watch the replay.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, for us in Canada, it was watch Raw on Monday night, and then Tuesday at 5:00, you would get Nitro the next day, so you could watch. You had the best of both worlds, right? So it's not ironic that when you start to see the downfall of WCW and everything starts happening from 98 on, and I'm sorry, it wasn't the finger poke of doom that ended WCW.
Thank you for saying that.
Yes, it wasn't. It wasn't, the Dungeon of Doom. It wasn't Hulk Hogan. It wasn't Vince Russo. I know a lot of people want to say it. It was what you just described, Andy. It was the lack of want by the executives in that whole conglomeration that was Turner's network, right? So, I mean, if you don't have the support of the higher ups, and they're just trying to bury you and trying to bury all their expenses there, how the hell do you survive that, right? You can put on the greatest wrestling product ever, and you're still not going to survive.
Well, and I actually heard a guy, and I forget what podcast it was on, but they were talking about the whole ESPN, TKO, Endeavor thing, and said Endeavor is still struggling financially from buying the UFC and WWE and all this merger and stuff.
Mostly the UFC.
And said that, for years, it was Vince McMahon. And, it was even, sort of mind-blowing that it was sold in the first place. But said that do not be surprised with the way the things are going now, that you don't see a new ownership of the WWE within the next 10 years.
Oh,
somebody else will buy it.
I think it's sooner than that, Ted, to be quite honest. I just coming from a corporate world, it reeks of they are stripping down as many expenses as possible to make their business as pretty as possible to the potential suitors, if you know what I mean, right? And they don't really care what they're putting out there as a product. They're just trying to make it look as viable and as attractive as possible so that the next buyer comes along and takes it. And I'm fully in the belief, and I may be crazy for this, I'm fully in the belief the whole reason that they're going to Saudi Arabia for WrestleMania is because they're going to announce the Saudis have purchased WWE. That's
Bingo.
my thought.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, they've got their whatever WWE World over there. They've been pumping that. There's money coming out the wazoo. I mean, TKO is bleeding money right now. No different than what was happening with Turner and their situation. So yeah, again, I know we're romping into the modern product, but I mean, it's eerie how much it mimics it right now.
Well, but I think that goes to what he's been talking about. What's the name of that book, Andy?
Oh, yes. Everybody have a drink. This is Nitro, the wonderful book by Guy Evans.
Yeah. The whole thing that even though just from a logistics point and looking at it from the 96, 97, 98, during those Monday Night Wars, it looks like Nitro is, and WCW is so successful, but because of the back door and all the money stuff, and then boom, all of a sudden it starts to go downhill. And again, I was shocked because I didn't know, being a fan, I knew the product sucked, but to see Vince then come on the simulcast and say, I own you guys. I mean, it was just mind blowing. So we're living in an age now where that's the thing, is that whole thing, it doesn't matter what we might think things are looking like. We do have a lot more reporting now to know what's going on behind the scenes as far as business and things like that. But yeah, it could easily, WWE could be sold again, and it wouldn't be that surprising. And just like WCW back then, you're watching the product and you're like, oh, it's going downhill. But even like in the early 90s, I guess in my mind, I thought, well, something will happen and they'll rebound. They'll turn it around because wrestling has always went up and down. They'll turn it around, but that time they didn't.
Yeah.
Because of what was it? They didn't turn around because of some corporate stuff. I mean, I think you can read in a book.
I think you read all about this book right here, Nitro by Guy Evans. And I'll have my obligatory drink here.
If you'd like to go on Amazon, use promo code AndyShot.
It'll get you an extra 30%. Never mind a discount. If we may, I'd like to just backtrack a little bit to your wonderful point about the finger poke of doom not killing WCW. Can we spend a little time on that?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So put your tinfoil hats on, boys, or your tin can. Well, it's not really a tin can, but you know what I'm saying. So, it's unfortunate the rewrite, and we talked about this previously, the rewriting of history, right? You know what? I can reach for it right here. Hang on 1 second.
It's Guy Evans' second book.
No, it's not.
Thunder.
But as a good wrestling fan, I have DVDs still right. So Monday Night War, Attitude Era, even the WWF, right? They'll end the same way. Is
one.
The big bad WWF vanquished their foe, right? They'll end the same way. Books like Wrestle Crap, and I'm not using that word disparagingly, that's what they call themselves, but their book of Who Killed WCW, or whatever that book was called, where they specifically point to the finger poke of doom while simultaneously ignoring everything related to the Time Warner merger, is garbage. It's a terrible narrative. There's been, I couldn't tell you how many podcasts over the years that do the good old watch along, and they will watch the WCW programs because they know how it ends. So they watch it through that lens, right?
Yeah.
They watch the WWF programs through the rose-colored glasses because they won. They were the victors. They got him in the end.
Yeah.
Completely negating the fact that there's a lot of absolute trash on WWF program. I think a lot of us, if you're looking at it objectively, that's the truth, right?
Yeah.
But it's these prevailing narratives are just, they're so bad for people to look back on, because now, and this is going to go outside of the bubble a little bit, but BC, you made the point the other day on Facebook, right? what does everybody think about this AI wrestling slop?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem with these prevailing narratives that have come out in the wrestle crap, I emphasize the latter part of that word, book about the death of WCW. When you have guys like Brian Alvarez who just refuse to acknowledge what really happened, they're just very happy to just, Bischoff's an idiot. Even Cornette's bad for that, right? WCW failed because Bischoff had the NWO and he didn't know what to do with it after. Fair criticisms, but that's not what really happened, right? So when you have these prevailing narratives, and now you have some kid who's maybe 16 to 20, maybe he's starting to get into wrestling history. Maybe he wants to know what happened, with the Monday Night Wars, and he goes on Chat GPT or he goes on Grok or he does whatever, and he puts in what happened in the Monday Night Wars. Well, all these large language models pick up on the prevailing narratives, right? They don't give you what actually happened. They don't talk about Turner Home Movies taking 100% of the WCW pay-per-view revenues from 1997 forward and putting it into their pockets, right? They don't talk about how merchandising sales were handled by Turner Home Movies or Turner Movie Classics, the people in that department, right? So there's other money out the door. They don't talk about how their WCW had to pay TNT to produce Thunder, not just pay to produce Thunder. They had to pay the network that they were on to produce the show that they were producing for that network, right?
Right.
Nobody talks about these things. And so you have what's left nowadays, the lazy narrative. It's the finger poke of doom. Kevin Nash's booking killed them. Or even Vince Russo was the final nail in the coffin. And you could say that. Some of it's true, but that's really missing the point of what happened, right? Ted Turner is the one who again, I'm going to go on a soapbox here and I apologize, but I can honestly stand here today and say that I'm still a wrestling fan because of Ted Turner. Because if Ted Turner didn't buy WCW, it wouldn't have forced WWF to get off their ass and not do the hokey cartoon wrestling. It propelled them towards the Attitude Era, right?
Yeah.
If Ted Turner didn't force Vince McMahon's hand into making a better product, I wouldn't be a wrestling fan today. Because guess what? There would be no WCW, which means who knows what WWF would be like today, or even if it would exist. We have no idea. Nobody can know like alternate timelines and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But it certainly wouldn't be the juggernaut it is today. And you've drawn comparisons to the past and present, right? You see it exactly happening the same way now. WWE has no competition, period. AEW is not a competition. They're there. And they shouldn't be a competition, not yet at least. But now you have WWE in this like purgatory where they just hemorrhage viewers or hemorrhaging fans. They're putting on the sale product. Very clearly, this thing is just being built to be sold to the Saudis. Everybody can see it coming a mile away, right? It's a shame. Those who do not learn history are doomed to repeat it, and we're seeing it today. It's happening right before our very eyes. And I'm very concerned that, people who have the same lazy narratives about the way that WCW went out of business are going to have the exact same lazy narratives about WWF today. They just don't, they get set in their ways and they don't see any other way to do it. And AEW, they had their shot. They blew it. I mean, they tried to go for the ultra gory. They tried to go for all these things that just puts off the people like, and I'm not even old. Like I'm 40. I guess I'm old technically speaking, but like I'm not letting my kids watch that. Come on. Whereas like back in my day, I was a kid watching wrestling.
Yeah.
So it's a shame.
Yeah. Ted, anything you want to add on to that point by Andy?
And I apologize for the diatribe.
No, it's fine.
No, I agree. Like you said, there is a lot of lazy narratives out there, and the whole thing. I will say It wasn't the finger poke of doom, or I do like the conspiracy theories that Vince Russo was sent down there to sabotage WWE. I
put
like
those
that one.
tinfoil hats on, boys. Let's go.
And we got to say, if I was going to do one angle instead of finger poke of doom, I would lean more towards Judy Bagwell on a forklift.
Yeah.
That one was more, because I have, I don't mind putting items on a pole or high, ladder match, a belt. But even let's go back to Jim Crockett. Growing up in the Appalachian Mountains, in a coal mining town, they had these matches between the Boogie Woogie Man and Baron von Raschke and some of these other, and they would put a coal miner's glove on a pole, and it was supposed to be this lead. Okay, I know people worked in the coal mines. Nobody had one of those gloves. Okay, it was not a thing, Or you put poor Abdul the Butcher and Manny Fernandez in a sombrero on a pole match. Abby's not going up to the top turnbuckle and getting on that pole. Okay. So, let's be a little more realistic on what we're going to put high up in the air. Okay. That's all I'm going to say. So.
Viagra on a pole might have been the worst one too.
Let's,
It's funny, Ted. Like again, I'm watching the '84 Mid-South, and of course, Crusher Khrushchev's big thing is the coal miner's glove.
I know we didn't have them. Nobody had a coal miner's glove. Maybe back in the 20s or something. But no,
you're telling me I can't go on eBay right now and buy myself a coal miner's glove?
I mean, not like that. I mean, if they would have put,
I can't believe it.
Maybe the hat with the light on it, maybe something like that. You hit them with the hard hat that had a light on it and bust the glass on them. But
or even the pick that they use, right?
Or if you want to go really back, if you really want to go back to the early coal mines, when they would dig for the coal, sometimes they would hit a seam of methane gas.
Yeah.
So do you know how they would detect that?
Was a canary, I believe.
Yes, a canary. Yeah. They would take a cage and put the canary down in there, and if the canary died, it was full of methane. We don't dig no more. Mm-hmm. So, put a canary in a cage on a pole. Let's do that if we're going to talk about coal mining, okay?
I might be the most southern Winnipegger you meet, so I do know all these references.
Right, or instead of, back then, instead of Judy Bagwell, let's put a coal miner's daughter. Let's put Loretta Lynn up there on the forklift.
And she hits the guy with the guitar.
She's doing it.
It would have been Jeff Jarrett's specialty match, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, okay. Let's wrap up this segment on Turner here, because it's I don't want to take too much of your time. You guys have been awesome about this, and I still do want to talk about Hogan's documentary briefly, but if you were to say overall, and I'll give you both a chance to talk about this, what would you consider Ted Turner's legacy to professional wrestling? Was he good for professional wrestling? Was he bad for professional wrestling? What was it that he gave to the world of professional wrestling, to wrestling fans? Overall, what would you surmise it to be? Ted, I'll let you lead off.
I think it was good. It brought it into more homes. And from a personal note, I'm very thankful for Ted Turner. Rest in peace. I had a good dad. He worked hard, but he was a quiet man, and we didn't have a lot in common. I was big in sports. He was not really a sports guy, but the one thing we did every Saturday night when Mom was gone and my sister or whatever is at 6:05, me and him were watching wrestling.
Yeah.
And Dad was one of those in one breath. Oh, that's fake. If somebody hit me with a chair like that, I could hurt somebody. Then the next minute he's off the couch cheering for the faces and the good guys while I'm cheering for the heels. And, I think that whole thing that Ted Turner did with the SuperStation, with the, you could watch Andy Griffith, you could watch wrestling, and something that families could just come together and watch some TV together. And so I think Ted Turner was great for wrestling, and I'm thankful for the time that he gave me and my father, that we had something that we could share in common.
Well said. Well said. Andy?
Yeah, so I kind of played my card a little bit earlier, but I think that wrestling today is nowhere near where it is if you don't have Ted Turner. The reality is, it doesn't matter what anybody wants to say. Like, objectively, if he doesn't purchase purchase JCP, which then turns into WCW, I don't want to get lost in semantics to make my point. We're not where we are today. I don't know that I'm a wrestling fan today, to be completely honest. I think that there are literal generations of fans who owe their fandom to Ted Turner, and they may not realize it looking back on it now. But if he doesn't make that purchase, if he doesn't put a young, fresh face, Eric Bischoff, in the position that he's in to push the network, if he doesn't pull the strings that he does to, even when he owns wrestling on that network, to make that network own it and move it forward, we're just not here today. And it took, again, I can't stress this enough, the worst merger in business history, the worst merger in business history, to get Ted Turner out and finally kill off WCW. Because the reality is, if he would have never lost control of his businesses, we would still have the WCW today. What it would look like, couldn't tell you. But for sure, for certain, we would have a WCW today. And there, just one other thing I want to say. It's an absolute disgusting, maybe too large a word to use, but I don't know a proper one to say it off the top of my head right now. And I do have pasta brain from being out for dinner with family tonight. But it's travesty is probably the way to go. It's a travesty that he is not inducted into Professional Wrestling Hall of Fames. Doesn't matter if it's the so-called one in Austin, Texas, or if it's the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame. Think of that what you will. The fact of the matter is that when his name is up for nomination every year, and people don't nominate him because they think they hold WCW going out of business over his head for some reason, even though I've talked about it ad nauseum, and I'll bring it up again if you want to read what actually happened, right? But I can't belabor the point enough. Like, people who don't want to induct Ted Turner into a Wrestling Hall of Fame for everything that he did for wrestling is ridiculous. And if you call yourself a historian, like a real wrestling historian, and you're, still in that bandwagon that he should forfeit any induction because he lost control of it, like, come on. It's terrible. So Ted Turner, Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame, get him in there, straighten up. I know some of you watch this show, straighten up. And just he is just a giant in this professional wrestling business. And I really truthfully hope that people will get out of their way a little bit and see him for what he really was.
Well, I consider that a 6-star plea, Andy.
Well, it's not the Tokyo Dome. It can't be 6 stars.
Real quick on that, where he was talking about the way the WWE and the Attitude Era enforcing them, and I can't believe we didn't mention this. You knew that it bothered Vince
because he talked about him.
Because you had Billionaire Ted, the Nacho Man, the Huckster. You had those skits.
Yeah.
And for him to even, because again, like you said, Ted Turner is not the promoter. He's not the booker. He's just telling these other guys to do it. But yet he made the skit along with Macho Man and Hogan. So that was the thing. Again, if if it wasn't important, then they would have never even said a word about it.
And can we just real quickly again? Everybody knows the lines at this point, but Ted Turner loved those skits. He loved them.
Yeah,
he got a kick out of them.
He got a kick out of them. Like, what a guy! It's just great. It's great.
Well, you missed it, Andy. We were talking before you got in here, and like Cornette talked about it on a show, and he was eulogizing Turner. He said Ted Turner was the cool billionaire who's, sailing yachts, buying sports teams, being with Jane Fonda, and Vince McMahon's the weird billionaire who's, just addicted to wrestling and doing all his weird stuff, right?
Who would have saw that coming? Like a philanthropist, like, I mean, just honestly, and you know what? I did hear the Cornette thing, and he made a good point that it really does seem like Ted Turner was the last of the good billionaires. And like,
I don't know if there's ever any of those, but
I know, but I mean, you look at what we have nowadays, and it ain't the same.
Yeah,
I will say, and I know people can love him or hate him, but I live out in the country, and I have not had internet for years. So thank you, Elon, for Starlink, because now I've got internet. So I will give Elon a shout out for Starlink, because we had nothing out here. I mean, it was terrible.
Go on Starlink.com, use promo code TED. He'll be your purchase.
He is listening to us right now.
For sure.
Probably.
Ted was the first guy to get the implant for it. Oh my. Well, this is why I brought the two of you together on the show, because we got Ted, who's so passionate about the 80s side of the wrestling, and lived that whole Turner broadcasting system era of wrestling. And then Andy, you're so passionate about the 90s version of that, and lived through the whole Nitro era and the Bischoff era and the eventual demise of it too, right? And I think both of you said it well. And for me, I guess with Turner, what his contribution to wrestling, I think he made a major contribution wrestling in two different eras, to be quite honest. Because one, he created a SuperStation that beamed this product all across the United States, where it was all regional up until that time. I know Vince McMahon was the one who supposedly went national, but technically Ted Turner went national before Vince did, right? You're getting to see, as we call it, Southern Rasslin in your home, whether you're in LA, New York, Florida, wherever, and you're seeing these stars, like they arguably the greatest world champion of all time with Ric Flair. You're seeing them on the regular, in your home in the 80s, which is amazing. He staved off the complete engulfment of all wrestling by Vince McMahon. Like he staved that off himself by having Jim Crockett Promotions on his network, by purchasing WCW when easily that could have been purchased by Vince McMahon. It only went for about $9 million. We're not talking TKO numbers here. Vince could have pulled that out of the couch cushions at that point and bought, Jim Crockett Promotions. And then in the 90s, this is where kind of the rebel billionaire comes into play. He's like, I'm bankrolling this thing, and we are going to, because I love wrestling, and it was what got me to where I am today as far as that network. And let's go. Let's. All right, Eric, here you go. Let's make this happen. And he managed. You can say Bischoff beat Vince McMahon for 83 weeks, but really Turner did, because he's the one that's bankrolling it, and he's saying, okay, just do it and don't lose too much money. And you had, for the first time ever, somebody beating Vince McMahon at his own game, and quite handily for a little while there. And it produced some of the greatest era to be a wrestling fan. So major contribution to the wrestling industry, in my viewpoint, in two eras of wrestling. So I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be in a builders category as far as the Wrestling Observer or the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, or even I could see one day him being in the WWE Hall of Fame because he pushed Vince McMahon into another mode. Could you imagine if all of a sudden in 93 or 94, they don't sign Hogan, it just starts to really trail off. And in our last image of WCW is Big Josh with his two bears or something like that. And we continue the new generation era of WWF. And it's just, what's motivating Vince to make that product that much better, right? What is motivating him? So it's all the butterfly effect, as we call it, right? So yeah, I'm with you guys. Definitely major component of the wrestling industry in a weird way. I guess it's not your typical promoter or owner or whatever, but definitely backer, I guess you can call it.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree.
Yeah. All right. One more thing I wanted to touch on, and I know, Ted, you haven't gotten a chance.
Is it hating on Tony Schiavone? Because I'm all for it.
Well, Ted's a fan of Tony, so you got to be careful there.
Come on.
That's my childhood. I love Tony. He's gotten to be a little cranky old man, but that's okay.
Present company accepted, I suppose.
Well, he's I guess my biggest complaint about Schiavone now is some of those tennis shoes you're wearing. Some of those shoes and those ties. That was a little weird.
All right, BC, sort of hijack your.
Now, what were you going to say about Schiavone? What was it in regards to?
Oh, he's the worst. Come on. Everybody talks about Ed Whalen's the worst play-by-play in wrestling. No, come on. We've already been through this throughout the Hogan series that we did. I think Schiavone is the worst, and that's a personal opinion. And I can respect what he's done for wrestling, and I can still say that he's the worst in my opinion. That's all.
Well, the thing about Schiavone,
compliment there.
Schiavone knows his role. Schiavone knows his role.
Yeah, he should shut his mouth too.
He knows his role. He knows he's not the best at everything or whatever, but he knows his role. He knows, I'll hold the microphone for you back in the day, and then it was over. Now he knows how to say, good point, Nigel, or good point, Excalibur. He knows how to do that, and then he'll say something.
To hold the microphone and for the person.
But then when all fails, all he has to do, and it always gives me the chill bumps, is all he has to do is turn around and go, "It's Sting,"
And I will say, just for God happens, or God hope it doesn't happen for a long time, because I hope he lives a long, successful life. But when and if Tony Schiavone ever passes away, I still want to be invited on to the Wrestling with the 80s Tony Schiavone tribute show, and I will be objective about him, believe it or not.
Well, the thing that I love about Tony Schiavone is, if you ever listen to his podcast, he seems like this mild-mannered man, and just like, what was his name? Bob Saget from
I was just about to say, he's like Bob Saget.
He's the dad. He's mild-mannered. But then when he gets off his show, Schiavone has got one of the foulest mouths I've ever heard. Just as much as he cusses and stuff like that. And it's just like, it's like, okay,
He's filthy, that's for sure. But yeah. Well, we'll do an episode on Schiavone, and we'll have a counterpoint episode is what we'll do.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh my. Okay, the last thing I was going to touch on, is I promised people I would, was talking about the Hulk Hogan documentary on Netflix. And I know, Andy, you mentioned you got to see the first 2 episodes, was it?
Yeah, both the first 2. Yeah.
Yeah. So
get to the final 2.
Yeah. So, and Ted, you haven't seen any of it, unfortunately, as of yet, right?
No, but if you want me to fake it, I can pretend it. I can probably make a plausible claim. Just tell me from the beginning, is it a fluff piece or do they go real deal?
Well, it's a little of both, is what I'm going to say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, it's a 4-part series. It's in total, I'd say it's, when you combine them all, it's just a little over 4 hours total. So not as in depth as our episodes, Andy. So
I don't think
Yeah,
anybody
yeah.
went in depth as we did.
Yeah.
so they're failing there. But what I will say about the documentary, a few things. One, the first two episodes, Andy, you've seen the first two. I'd say they're the best of the episodes because they really concentrate on the rise of Hogan and the relation, like his rise from his early days to the first run in the WWF and the AWA, and then his run as Hulkamania and all that stuff. And there is a little bit of honesty in it. I mean, Jerry Lawler's on there talking about how, Hogan, basically wasn't that good. And he didn't think he's going to draw a dime and stuff like that. But they're probably doing it to make Jerry look bad. But it's not crazy with the Hoganisms and the lies and stuff like that, because that's what he's become well known for. But my takeaway from the first two episodes, one, the soundtrack for this documentary is phenomenal. Like the music they licensed for this was unreal. When I heard Chicago 25 or 6-4, like I'm like, what? Like they got Chicago on here, like, and it was so fitting. I mean, they had Huey Lewis on there, and they had like just AC/DC and so many good songs. So it's really well shot. It's really well done. The soundtrack is amazing. I guess my problem that I have is it's Hulk Hogan, so you're never going to truly get Terry Bollea for very long, right? You're not going to. You did see a little bit when he talks about when he talks about Linda Hogan, you see Terry Bollea come through. Like you could still see there was that love there, you know what I mean, between the two. And I gotta say, Linda Hogan, man, like she's the kind of person that if she's on your side, man, you want her on your side because she is all about you. But if she's your enemy, look the hell up. I'm gonna say that because she is one vindictive person. Like when she talks about how she was dating that friend of Nick's or whatever, and the things she was doing just to piss Hogan off was just unbelievable, right? But she was the star of this documentary, I think, in more ways than one, just from what she had to talk about, but also, she documented a lot of their personal life. Like you got to see Hulk Hogan as Terry Bollea with his children and stuff like that, right? Which is something you never saw. That was another thing where you actually, for a moment, you saw Terry Bollea as well, as when he was talking about his kids and how much he missed out on their life, growing up. And he really wished that he had been able to be a regular father and stuff like that. But, he wasn't there. When he talks about his brother as well, like his brother had gotten involved with, like, I think the Hells Angels or something like that. He saw him shortly after WrestleMania 1. And, his brother came to see him and he was basically asking for some money. Hogan was like, I have a feeling I know where this is going to, but he's my brother. Should I help him out? And he's the back and forth. He ends up giving him money. His brother ends up overdosing that night. And he's like, got to live with that regret, of like, I should have just took him with me, not giving them the money, that type of thing. You did see a bit of Terry Bollea there, I think, too. When he talks about his deal with the Make-A-Wish kids, like that's when I think you see the real Terry Bollea, right? And it's funny, everybody goes on and on and on. This is something I was thinking about. They go on and on about John Cena, and he broke the record for the Make-A-Wish, and that's all well and good, but we all know right now that is just a marketing thing. It's a marketing thing right now, right? More so than it's. And I'm not crapping on John Cena, but it's. Stephanie Mann came out and said charity is going to be our number one marketing strategy over the next few years, right? A few years ago, Hogan, it's Hogan's record that Cena broke, right? And Hogan's doing this at a time when it wasn't as big a deal, that this Make-A-Wish stuff and stuff like that. You might have had like a Michael Jackson doing it, and you had Hulk Hogan, and Hulk Hogan granted over 400 wishes or something like this, right? You saw a little bit of the real Terry Bollea. That was pretty much it. The rest of the time, it's Hulk Hogan, right? So I wish you could have got that separation from it. Keith Elliott Greenberg had the best line of the. Well, no, Bret Hart usually had the best lines because it's Bret, right? But Keith Elliott Greenberg had a funny line where he said, every time Hogan talks about Andre the Giant, he gets 100 pounds heavier.
Which is true.
Which is true. But, you know, and I mean, he had a line where he talked about getting Arsenio Hall his job and stuff like this when he's talked about the whole going on Arsenio and stuff like that, right? But he also, when you see him, he talks about, you know, his, does he have regrets? He's like, I shouldn't have done that. Like, there's a lot of things where he's like, I shouldn't have done that. You know, I should have just said the truth or whatever, right? You know, and it would have just been so much better. You know, so it's interesting. Those first two episodes are really well done because the first one's really talked about the wrestling side. The second one's talking, I think you got them in order, but maybe Andy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the second one's more about him and Linda. And I mean,
big time.
And like, it's unreal. If I'm Hogan's current wife, I'm kind of like, you know, like there's a lot of Linda in this, but she was hilarious. And you know, you can tell there's that connection with those two. The third one really kind of gets into like the downfall of Hogan in the early 90s, the steroid trial, and then it picks up again when we get into the NWO years. And you know, it's not as good as the first two, but the third one, once you get into the NWO years, you really see how it's like Hogan, he kind of allowed himself to fall back into that lifestyle, and then it really started to eat him up, chew him up, that kind of thing, right? The fourth one gets into the injuries, the back surgeries, and you really do see like, holy crap, this guy went through a lot, like as far as injuries, back surgeries, like his spine, when they showed the x-ray of his spine, and it's basically, it looks like an S, you know, it's he's got like the machine in his back that's stimulating the muscles in the spine or whatever. You know, unfortunately it goes down the route of the whole political thing with Trump. But and then I'm sitting there going, this guy got the president of the United States to talk on his documentary, so he must be doing something right, you know. But of course they're going to politicize it, and they're going to talk about the Trump thing and all that. In the end, though, to me, it was, if you're someone who was a fan of Hogan, you're going to watch it and you're going to understand there's going to be the Hulk Hoganisms, you know, like the 700-pound stinky giant. There's going to be, I got Arsenio his job and stuff like that. But there's so much in it. Then maybe Andy, you might have noticed this even just from the first two. There's a lot of stuff in there that I had never seen before. Like some of the footage from the wrestling side of things, right? And really like cleaned up footage of like his days in Florida and in Southwest Championship Wrestling and all that stuff, right? So there's a lot of interesting stuff. If you're someone who hates Hogan, you're going to hate Hogan no matter what. So this just gives you another excuse to hate him more. So I don't even know why you're going to watch it. For someone who's not a wrestling fan, I think they're going to enjoy it. And it doesn't matter whether they know he's lying about this or somebody's exaggerating this. Tell me a wrestler who doesn't lie about something. Nope. Maybe Brett, that's the only one, but he just doesn't care. But
his thing might be too honest about things.
Yeah, I like his line. He's talking about Hogan's lies. Is like, you know, if you tell a lie, you're a liar. That's what he says. Yeah. Right? Yeah. You know, that's true, right? But overall, I'm, you know, like I say, I'm a Hogan historian. I'm a Hogan fan. And this is the other thing. I felt like, at least with this, I feel like there was a lot of Hogan fans that felt like they couldn't be Hogan fans over the last little while because all the crap that went on with him. And I think it gave permission for people to be Hogan fans again, you know, especially now that he's passed away. And the timing of this is just unreal. I mean, they shot this 6 months before he passed away, right? And then, of course, in the last episode, it was sad. Like, you know, when you see all the people, you know, that all the wrestling people talking about Hogan, and, you know, some of the people learned about his death while they're filming this, so it does get you emotionally and stuff like that. Jimmy Hart had some great poignant lines too, and I actually heard Jimmy drop an F-bomb, which I've never heard in my
Yeah, no
life.
kidding.
And he had a great point about Hogan's kids that you don't think about. He's like, talk about the Make-A-Wish and stuff like that. And he's like, Hogan's kids, they had to share their father with every kid in the entire world. Like he, no matter where he went, the kids, he was marketed towards the kids, and they had to share him with everything. And it's amazing that they didn't turn out even worse than they did. It's a shame that Brooke Hogan wasn't a part of it. That's unfortunate. It's a shame that Vince McMahon couldn't be part of it as well, because they had some
reasons.
Yeah, they had some like voiceover stuff from other things, probably the Vince McMahon documentary, and they did show him at the funeral. But other than that, he's going to be persona non grata. But overall, to me, I thought it was exceptionally well produced and shot, and the soundtrack was amazing. So, like I say, if somebody's not a wrestling fan, they're going to still watch and go, "Wow, this is pretty good," and the way they go, both the personal side and the stories and his relationship with Linda and all this stuff, it really plays on everything. And again, if you're a hater, you're going to hate no matter what. If you're somebody who knows him, you know what to expect. And you're just hoping that you find out some new stuff. And I found out some new stuff, the stuff about his brother, the stuff about his relationship with his father and mother. His father wasn't the most supportive person, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The home movies of him with the kids, that kind of stuff. Just all that. So anyways, sorry to drag this out, but I thought it was great. And I'd suggest people give it a watch, and any wrestling fan's going to know how to take Hogan with some of his stories. But it wasn't like it was 4 hours of Hogan just fabricating everything. I don't want to make it sound like that. There are a lot of stuff that's factual, but it's there's some that you just sit there and you go, if you're watching with your wife, you go, well, that's not true. That's not how it happened, right? But yeah.
He was making $300 a week in the end of or AWA. Like, that's not true.
Yeah, or they were living off of $3,500 a month. Linda said this one, they were living off of $3,500 a month in 1985. I'm like,
no, you definitely were not. But
no, but yeah, Andy, your thoughts on those first couple episodes that you saw?
Yeah, honestly, so I wish that it could have been a 4-part series on like the building of Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
I love the home movies and that part of it.
Yeah.
I would have rather, and I know you can't, because then people are going to go, oh, you only showed that because you didn't want to talk about the bad stuff. You know, that's how that would have gone. Right.
Yeah.
But I would have honestly loved if it would have been a 4-part documentary on like how he went from Terry Bollea and turned into Hulk Hogan into the mid-80s, and but showed the progression of like his show, which they did some of it, but expand on it a bit more, right? More the whole movie stuff and stuff with it, because that's my favorite part.
Yeah.
Linda, she is definitely made for TV, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And she is very comfortable in that spot. And,
yeah.
I haven't seen it yet, but is it episode 4 when they do the Hogan Knows Best thing, or is that number?
Yeah. They're getting into the controversies in episode 4. Yeah.
Okay. So I did hear Cornette and Brian Last talking about her really pushing for that, and you could tell, like, and it's not a knock, right? Some people, that's what they want to do, right? Be a celebrity. And you can tell that she wants to be a celebrity. And that's fine. But, it's, a great picture there too. It's a shame that Brooke wasn't involved. I mean, her story's a bit interesting as well, the way, her music career went, her time in wrestling went, because she had that stint in TNA. as well.
Yeah.
They didn't really dive into any of that.
Her marriage to Bully Ray.
Yeah. Yes. Very strange. And then Dixie Carter declined to be interviewed, which I thought was interesting for the program. So just a little side note.
Yeah. I it's like, I'm going to put this image up here. This is where he's talking about his brother. And that's the only part in the documentary where he had to shut the cameras down because it was, like I said, you finally saw some Terry Bollea in there. And that's what I would have liked to see more of. Is just, but I don't think you can. And it made me think about it a lot. Like, and this goes back to, and I said this earlier, like, and I'm not sure if it was while you were here or not, Andy, but what drives me crazy about anything nowadays, especially when it's somebody talking about something that happened in the past, but they were never around for it, and they're giving their 2 cents about it, and crap nut or whatever. I'm like, if you didn't live through it, you don't understand what it was like at that time. I use the comparison, like, well, I had the episode with Benny, right? And I talked about Bruno Sammartino. I'm never going to argue Hogan was bigger than Sammartino or Stone Cold was bigger than Sammartino or whatever, because I wasn't there to watch Sammartino. And I can say, well, I can go based on, ticket sales, or I can go based on the ratings or whatever. But you weren't in the moment. You don't understand the zeitgeist of what it was like to be a fan of that person.
Yeah.
It's like comparing baseball today. Like, was Babe Ruth or Barry Bonds the better hitter? It doesn't matter. It's 2 different generations. And, you can't put yourself back to that time period when baseball was in its infancy, and you're listening to it on the radio and you're reliving every moment, and it's just the overall thing. Now we're living in a world where we're just absolutely swamped with content, and there's just too much of that, right? You don't understand what it's like to run home after school to listen to the radio to hear the baseball game or the hockey game or something like that. When people talk about wrestling being slow back in the day, well, I just want to punch somebody when they talk about that. I'm like, go watch.
That just shows their ignorance.
Go watch JCP or go watch Mid-South. You tell me that's slow? It's just nonstop action was what's going on there, right? It's not all Rest Hold City and all that stuff. And they'll talk about, well, it's not like today's wrestling. It's like, well, you aren't there. You don't realize what it was like to grow up not having internet and not having cell phones at your disposal while you're watching something, not having social media to tell you what you should think about a product, right? Like, how many people actually watch WWE or AEW and turn off all the noise and actually watch the product? Or are they looking at their phone and seeing somebody else comment, oh, that move sucked, or that guy botched, or this guy did this, or this guy sucks? So you're not getting a true feeling about it. And that's what drives me crazy about different eras. And that's why I always say, if somebody asks me, okay, make your Mount Rushmore of something, I always preface it with, I'm only going to make it of the people that I got to witness, because I can't tell you what it was like to watch Bruno Sammartino, or I can't tell you what it was like to watch Maurice Rocket Richard or Babe Ruth. I can only tell you about the people I saw. So here's where it goes from this time period, right? So, and that's when people crap on the Hogan era and stuff like that, and because they're basing it off of who he voted for, and not basing it off of what he did for wrestling. You can't imagine what he did for us. He was globally recognized, and he was good or bad. He was it for wrestling back in the 80s. He's the guy that when I flipped on the TV and he's on the screen, I'm like, holy crap, I got to watch this guy do something. And then he was my gateway to watch even better people, like watching the British Bulldogs, watching Bret Hart, watching different people, right? But he's the guy that got me there. He was my gateway, right? And kind of goes back to like the whole, do you ever separate Hogan? How can you separate Hogan? It's like, how do you separate Michael Jackson from the character that he was? He's got a zillion fans stand outside his hotel room wherever he goes, screaming at him, just to see him. how do you separate that from Hulk Hogan? So I get why you don't get Terry Bollea. I don't think he ever, except when he was with his kids, ever kind of reverted back to Terry Bollea. He just had to be Hulk Hogan this whole time. So that's kind of where it comes from. So if you live in a world of kayfabe and you're a kayfabe character, guess what? Your stories are going to be kayfabe, right? So, yeah. Sorry, my diatribe.
No, even though I didn't watch it, I can say, and this, guys out there, if you're just starting a YouTube channel, this is how a good podcaster does something to circle it back around. Okay. Sterling Golden, aka Terry Bollea, aka Hulk Hogan, used to be on the SuperStation on Georgia Championship Wrestling at one time. So go look it up and you can see the progress, how he was getting the promos back then and all that. And I will also say he probably wouldn't have had a bad back if he'd have kept the bear hug as his finisher instead of going to the leg drop.
He actually mentions that, Ted. He says that. It's like, he even says, like, how stupid was I? I got the largest arms in the world, and here I am doing a leg drop. You know, it's like, and like, I forget who it was that talks about it. It might have been Pritchard or somebody, like, and Pritchard I can just toss away anyways, but they're like saying, like, this guy, like, he's doing a leg drop every night. Yeah. It's 300 pounds coming down on that spine. And, I know Hogan says he wrestled 400 nights. He didn't, but he was wrestling 300 nights. I guarantee you that. And that's 300 leg drops every day. Like, that's a lot of compression on your spine, and that's giving up, your back to the wrestling industry, and it's, and when you see, like, they'll talk about in that episode 3 or 4, Andy, and it's talking about the, like, the TNA run. And I mean, really, he did that, and he shouldn't have. Like, he was crippled basically, and he had to do it because he had to pay for his divorce, right? So it's just, it's, he talks about it. He's like, I should have ended it after WrestleMania 18. That's what I should have done. Like, went to Montreal, got that standing ovation. That should have been it. Yeah. Because I would go out on top and it would have been fine, but they don't do that.
We get WrestleMania and Shawn Michaels and the super kick and I love you. And we think, okay, Flair's done. Nope. I'll go to TNA. I'll come back. And wrestle with my son-in-law.
Yeah. Yeah, unreal. But anyways, like I say, I encourage all wrestling fans to check it out. It's just, just for the footage alone, it's pretty cool. Like, and it's just nice to see some of that old footage cleaned up too. So it's great. But yes. But anyways, I've taken up way too much of your guys' time, but I really appreciate this. I know we don't do the live streams all the time, but this has been phenomenal. Before we go, we still got a couple of viewers here, so kudos to them for sticking with us.
Yeah, thanks.
But if you guys want to one more time just promote where people can find you at.
Ted's Takes on Wrestling, like I said, a lot of shorts. Also at the beginning of the show, he was in the live stream. I don't know if he's still there, but I'm also Jaded Wrestling. Me and Taylor, we've been doing some things over on his channel, so go check him out. Now there's enough in the archives. We're going back and starting with AEW from the very beginning. We are on the first, second or third Dynamite ever. So we're going to talk about how it's changed and what happened at the beginning. So we're looking over those. And it's not your typical review show. We're not just going match by match or all that. We're just talking about weird stuff. Taylor got on a tangent about tassels on wrestlers' pants. So yeah, we'll talk about things like that. It'll be completely different. We are in favor of those first pay-per-views and matches that were sponsored by Cracker Barrel, that they had those matches. We do want Cracker Barrel to come back in because, I'm a big fan of Cracker Barrel breakfast that you can get all day long. So, Cracker Barrel needs to be back in wrestling. I'm all for that. So, yeah, check out Ted's Takes and Jaded Wrestling.
That is such a Taylor thing to get stuck on tassels on.
Yeah, it was.
Andy?
Yeah, just first, thanks for letting me be the third man in or doing the free bird rule, getting me in here tonight. Ted, it's been awesome talking with you as well.
Oh yeah.
Well, hold on a second. The third man, you're the third. Come on, we're talking Turner.
You're the
We're talking
Hogan, you're the
Nitro.
I know.
Yeah.
The full circle thing. I'm trying to learn to be a better podcaster, Ted. So I have taken notes. Believe it or not all of my notes reside in the Nitro book, which is available for purchase. Anyways.
At takeashot.com.
Yeah, takeashot.com. Also, Andy will not never invited back.com. So maybe another one. So, but yes, Grappling with Canada, you can find it on all major podcasting platforms, the audio version. We have some great episodes, not just the ones that BC has been very gracious with this time to be a part of, because much like this has been 3 hours, my episodes are, 3 to 4. But you are going to get a lot of history. You are going to get the truth in a lot of cases about some people that you want to learn about, whether it's Chief Don Eagle and the murder / suicide, the way that his life came to an end, and all things in between. Whether it's somebody like Billy Two Rivers, whether it's somebody like Gene Kiniski, or Antonio, the great Antonio. There are many fantastic episodes. Also finding about what really happened to Adrian Adonis and the rest of the wrestlers, including Dave McKigney, who passed away tragically in July of 1988. That episode is in the archives as well. But again, Grappling with Canada, use that wonderful YouTube search bar after you're done watching this video. We'd love to see you there. And again, Grappling with Canada on all major podcasting platforms.
Perfect. Love it. I appreciate both of you spending so much time with me. I know it's late and it's even later here, but my problem is I can talk wrestling all night long. So
it's not a problem.
That's an issue. But yeah, it's been fantastic. I thank everyone who participated in the live stream, participated in the chat. Benny, if you still have,
Benny, my boy.
Yeah, if you happen to be here, Benny, thank you very much. And if you want to see a fantastic episode on my channel, check out my interview with Benny Scala talking about Bruno Sammartino and his experiences with Bruno and being a lifelong fan of Bruno Sammartino. It's why Bruno was uno. My last episode that I did, I had an amazing interview with Evan Ginsberg, author, podcaster, associate producer of The Wrestler. It was another 3-hour epic odyssey, but man, it flew by and it was just full of so many great stories. I loved that interview. So it was great. Lots of stuff going on. Got some other stuff coming up in the future here. I got a episode in the waiting where I'm going to have Tyler Peters from Tyler's Takedowns talking about the Brain Busters in their run in the WWF. Got some Mid-South wrestling talk when we're going to be talking the territories with Russ Jackman, who's the host of Evan's podcast, Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast. So lots going on, and we'll continue to pump out some more stuff. But feel free to subscribe if you haven't already. But other than that, thank you very much, everybody, and keep loving wrestling. Keep checking out old wrestling because it's just the best, folks. It is the best. Anyways, folks, have a great night. Thank you very much.